All right.
Okay, so Airto, what's new?
Welcome to the show. Welcome back to Behind the Rail. And as everyone already knows, this is what episode 6,345. That's pretty good. We're on
46.
46. Okay, 46. Okay.
2004.
Yeah. And as always, I'm Airto Jackson, and we have Ken Eston. And
Though on sometimes on Wednesdays I'm Airto Jackson and
sure.
he's Kennison, but
Yeah. That's usually generally when the IRS is calling.
yeah.
Yeah. So that way we can switch up. Um, but I kind of want to open it up today to talk. Let me just adjust my camera a little bit. I have this really fancy camera. I think it's
Yeah, that's
eh,
your cameraman he's adjusting actually because
yeah.
he has a cameraman there.
I'm just touching him for because I want to make sure he doesn't fall over or anything. You got to spot these guys.
All
Um,
right, we hired drunk cameramen because they work cheaper and usually they just stand still anyhow. So
yeah.
all
But
right,
I wanted to talk about something because I don't know if we've touched on this before, but I want to talk about pitching and like that's definitely something that any writer's going to have to deal with when they get to other people and they move up. They're going to have to be able to express their ideas, and there's different phrases: elevator pitch if you're going to do it quickly, or long
uh,
form, and how prepared they should be. And what are your recommendations for going about that process of being prepared and how to handle a pitch?
but it depends on which pitch you're going in for. If you're pitching like somebody's want is maybe considering hiring you for freelance,
Hmm.
you should go in with pitch. You should have if they told you they might give you a freelance assignment, don't go in with just one idea because they might blow that out of the water in the first 2 minutes,
Hmm.
And so going with 5 to 10 ideas. I know people going with more than that, but pick your favorites to pitch first, and hopefully they'll go with the early pitches, and those are the ones you worked out the best. But have some backups so you don't at some point just look at them and say, "Well, I'm done."
Yeah.
They don't want to ever think you're done. You're an endless pool of or fountain of wonderful ideas. So,
I
um,
will say though, like I did pitch some guys. I won't say who it was, but I did go to a pitch meeting, and I was nervous a little bit, and they tried to make me comfortable. They break out the water bottles, and and then I'm just down in water like a crazy person. But I'm pitching these different ideas, and I can see they're kind of on board or whatever. But then I was like, they asked me like, what am I most interested in? So I pitched that. I'm talking about that. But there was a point in the meeting where I realized like I'm giving them too many options. So it is kind
mm,
of a fine line where you pitch stuff, and then once you got them hooked on something, try to hone in on that. Don't just keep
I agree with you. I agree.
pitching to
Have
the
the
moon.
other stuff for background back if they're not biting on anything, so you have more opportunities. But I agree totally. You don't want to give them too many choices because then they don't think they don't lock in on an idea or two and get their energy focused on that. So yeah, go in with your best idea. Hope you sell it. If at some point we're just not interested, you got anything else? Have another one. But 10's probably too many. You don't want to go with
No.
10. Though I hear people all the time say go in with 10, going with 10 ideas because sometimes they'll shoot you down the first line.
Hmm.
Depends on who you're pitching to.
Yeah. And what about the energy level? I mean, you got to kind of be able to read the room. Read the room is actually like a phrase. I don't know if, I'm sure there's people who are
Mm,
listening who know exactly what that means. That goes not only for the writer's room, but also for pitches and just in general dealing with people. Like if you look at like a sales technique, they say to mirror people so that way if somebody has high energy, bring some high energy. If somebody's a little bit
mm,
lower energy, have some lower energy. Everybody
mm.
wants to kind of maintain being themselves as much as you can, but you do want to read the room and be aware of the shifts
Yeah.
of energy when you're when you're in a pitch meeting.
Yeah, you've thought about that in more detail than I have because uh yeah, if you were in an energetic room, you don't want to be really slow paced and pitch your more profound and less stimulating ideas, perhaps.
Hmm. Right.
Yeah, but I really never thought about that because I usually kind of do that. This is something you do. You get in the room and you read the room. Well, like you
Yeah.
said, these are people who if they're kind of slow and methodical, it doesn't mean that doesn't mean you can't pitch rapid. I think the other's true though. If they're high strung, you don't want to pitch something very sedate and quiet. And, yeah. So yeah, you got to figure out the room you're in. It's going to be different places, and Um, it's a good point. It's a good point.
One of the things I kind of wanted to touch on is how to present an idea, right? Like not just the energy level, but how do you sell an idea? Like how do you get people excited? I mean, this kind of goes into, as writers, you're sort of a manipulator. Some people kind of have like a negative connotation to that. They don't really realize like what the power of using manipulation for your own gain, so they get what you want. No, I'm just kidding. But like,
Yeah.
so that you can, basically like get what you want. Not that you're trying to screw anyone over or lie. You don't want to be,
Yeah.
present a falsehood about yourself that's not, you're not going to be able to deliver on. But there is a certain amount of showmanship that comes into dealing with people, and also getting people excited about, joining your vision and your team, or being a part of a working team, because you're gonna have to carry that energy going forward.
Yeah.
So do you have any thoughts on anything like that, or
No.
no? Okay. Well.
No, pitching it's really tricky because some people prepare a lot for a pitch so far as to rehearse it with friends. I've known of people who do that. Will actually decide how they're going to pitch, what they're going to pitch, and then have some friends pretend to be the executives or whomever, and pitch to them. Actually practice it,
Mhm.
rehearse it. And I've heard people say you have to be a performer to pitch well. It depends on your status in the industry. If you're new and you're trying to get established, and you need everything you get, and you really got to be a good pitcher. So it means you got to you probably need to rehearse. You should write out a script, not that you're going to read from the script, but just for yourself, just so you understand how you can present it. Because when you go in and you pitch, have to be a little bit of an entertainer. Because if you don't entertain them, they don't want to make it,
Mhm.
and that's too bad.
Right.
It would be better if you could just send your script in, they read your script, and decide whether they want to work with you or not. But they don't do it that way, and they want you to entertain them because now, that doesn't mean you have to be a great entertainer. It doesn't mean you have to be juggling
Right.
machetes while you're standing on stilts.
Doesn't hurt, but
Um,
yeah.
if you could do that, I would do that. Yeah,
Right.
but um, but entertaining them is part of the deal because if they feel entertained, they think the product is entertainment, and they're more interested. So it's a lot of they make a lot of judgments based on excuse me, on your presentation, which is a shame. We were talking earlier about the difference between an Emmy and a Writers Guild Award.
Mhm.
I've won both, of
Mhm.
course,
Mhm.
but the Emmy isn't as prestigious to me. That's the wrong word. It is prestigious. Emmy's more prestigious, and a Writers Guild is more merit. Is more of an earned award, I think, the
Mhm.
Writers Guild,
Right.
because the Writers Guild is a blind script. They read scripts without title pages. Excuse me. Okay. Now they for the Writers Guild Award they read all the scripts from the year that they're up their potential nominees, and without title pages, they know the show, but they have no idea who wrote them. They also are reading from a script that supposedly the writer has written without help from anybody else, though the writer may have gotten notes and stuff, but it's had no other writing from other people.
Mhm.
Where the Emmys, on the other hand, they judge it from the show. They watch the show. And the show has influence from everybody, the actors, the director, I mean, their actual performances affect what they're seeing. So it's not only what you wrote, it's what the director might have invented, what the actors may have invented. And it also may have writing from, it went through a whole week of production, which means it has writing from all sorts of people who are on staff.
Mhm.
So the Emmy doesn't truly reflect entirely what you've done, and that's where I say pitching is like Emmys. They want you to entertain them. Where it's very frustrating because I used to not like doing that, and
Mhm.
I had to get myself up for it. So I had to make a script. I had to practice it. I had to um, when I say a script, I just mean an outline of your talk talking points or a script, however you want to do
But
it.
you got to know
But
your story. Like you got to
you got to
know what it
know,
is you're gonna pitch. Don't just kind of meander.
and you have to you have to a few punch things, like
Hmm.
maybe a joke or a dramatic moment or something that you are aware you're going to place in there somewhere that came up while you were thinking about it, not on the spot in front of those people you're pitching to. So you have to prepare for a pitch. You can't just go in and say, okay, I'll just wing it. You don't want to wing it.
Yeah, and it
So
has, there's a lot involved with getting people to believe in something that you are doing, and being a showman is part of it. Being articulate, being aware of what it is that you're actually saying to someone. If you're making it up on the spot, or if it gives people that feel, and now if you're taking them on a journey and they feel like, oh wow, he's making this up on the spot, and you're on a journey and they're like right there with you. Some people are better oratory speakers. They're better storytellers, whereas like for writers, especially for writers, typically are a little bit more wallflowerish. Not all writers are wallflowers, but we're usually a little bit more in the pocket and a little bit more observant and less brash, or bold like
yeah,
that. Not brash,
yeah,
but bold.
bold,
Yeah.
bold. Um, yeah, I think that the best way to do it is to prepare something in advance and then pitch it as though it's spontaneous, so they believe you're making it up on the
Right.
spot. You
Yeah,
want to fake them. You want to fake them out.
you want it to
You
feel
want,
fresh.
yeah, yeah. You don't want them to think you memorized it or you're doing script. If they
Yeah.
think you're reading from a script, or if you literally have your notes in front of you and you're reading from your notes, slows things way down.
Yeah.
So it's all impression. We were talking about this earlier. Impression is so important that it's partially where you are manipulating your audience. And I've seen critics, I've seen reviews from critics where they've criticized a movie or a show or a performance for being too manipulative.
Hmm.
But that's what we do. You manipulate people. So the point, when you're too manipulative, it's when it feels kind of strained and obvious, and it's not fine and not fine tuned. You're always manipulating people, though. That's what entertainment is, whether
Hmm.
it's a song, or music, or a play, or a movie, whatever. The whole point is to play with people's emotions. So you
Yeah, you're
manipulate.
coaxing something out of them that wasn't, genuine to that particular time. Making someone laugh or making someone cry or get angry
Yeah,
about a particular topic and feel um, so impassioned to move on that subject. Get out in the streets and riot or something like that. Those are all manipulative topics, or not topics, but techniques. And
yeah,
it's not like you're doing it. You're not taking it to that length. Like so that way you can incite a riot or anything. But
yeah. Or you're not manipulating somebody to take all their savings out of their bank account so you
right.
can follow them home and steal it.
Yeah,
You know, no, but you're manipulating your audience because they want to be. It's like when somebody goes on a roller coaster.
right.
They want you to manipulate them. They're saying, "I'm here to be
Yeah,
manipulated." So when they sit in a theater, they're saying, "I'm here to be manipulated in front of the TV sets.
yeah. They
That's
suspend
why I'm
disbelief
here."
because they want to go on that journey, that adventure with you. They know it's
Right.
not necessarily real, but they want, and we're kind of preaching to the choir. I'm sure there's probably a lot of people that really understand that, but it is good to, kind of pinpoint those things and say, hey, speak them out loud, because, maybe there are people who are listening that aren't putting them all together like that. But it is really fascinating. It's a very fascinating skill set. It's different than writing. It's but it is kind of like writing because you're creating in a way a character. Like
Yeah. So if you're very quiet and it's very hard for you to speak up, it's also going to be a little bit harder for you. And you're going to have to overcome that, because in television, they want people who are a little more outgoing. I've told this when I worked on a show called Taxi a long time ago, and I started out as a freelance writer on the show and eventually became story editor and moved my way up until I was running the show. But when they were ready to have somebody run the show, they didn't want me because they thought I was too nice and quiet and soft spoken, and they thought they needed hard asses because that's what they usually put in those jobs. And the only reason I got the job was because I had done very well on the show, and they didn't have anybody with somebody whose track record they really knew well to come in and take over. So they took a chance with me, and I proved that you could do it without having to be a guy who screams at people and forces people to do things your way and always your way and dogmatically and whatever. Uh, you don't have to do it that way, but they expect that's what they're looking for. So you got to find your way in. So you don't have to be a real aggressive personality, but you have to be aggressive enough to fake them out. That's manipulation. That's also psychology. You got to use a little bit of psychology in this business because it's not fair. It should be a merit system. It should be based on the writing. Boom.
Hmm.
That's it. But it's not. So you're gonna have to be able to do other things as well as write.
But it's interesting too because what gets you there might not be what keeps you there. So like if talent got you some notice and then now you're in the room, and if you do want to be a showrunner, as a showrunner, you may have to be a bit aggressive and be a little bit dogmatic or, have those traits. But in the room, when you're sharing ideas with different writers, it's not helpful to be, that type of personality. You want to be a little bit more, not accommodating. You want to stand your ground and say, I believe I believe this story tact or angle isn't working because of XYZ, but it's not really about the writer. It's more about the writing. But
Yeah.
it doesn't help to be like, so you don't want to shoot everybody's stuff down. You want to be a little bit like, like champion people's stuff as well, so that way, you know ideas can get out there.
Yeah. It's easier to shoot somebody's idea down than to pitch your own ideas. So I've seen this happen in a writer's room or somebody who can't come up with their own ideas very well or don't come up with enough of them spend their time getting their voice heard and looking like they're participating
Hmm.
by vocally telling other ideas or telling people their ideas are bad or terrible or and not really having ideas to replace them with. And most often that doesn't work and people kind of can see that's what you're doing. But I've known people who have succeeded doing that, basically just being able to tell you what's wrong with things and not telling you what's right.
What are the names of those people?
Yeah.
No, yeah, I mean that's definitely part of it. Like I've definitely been, like writers groups or what have you, where somebody's always got a fix for your story, but their fix fucking goes into outer space. It has nothing to do with your story and it's not helpful at all. It doesn't get to the root of the problem. It's not a fix. It's just a way for them to kind of, I don't even know if they're aware of it, but psychologically it's like a way to divert attention to them. Like, oh, look at me, I'm the better writer or whatever. And
Yeah.
they don't really want to recognize that. And they don't want to recognize that your writing is actually good. But we talked about this a little bit too earlier, is it seems like people who are talented and good at something recognize talent and strength in other people. But people who are not that talented, they seem to be the ones that kind of like will pull people down a little bit. And it's probably not always the case. And I guess, you'll name some
No.
names here in a second, but um,
Yeah, I'm never gonna get to names.
but I do feel like there is part of that, and it's like building a reputation. We as a writer, you said something one time that was really interesting to me, and and hopefully this will we can clarify this, but you were saying that a lot of the times or sometimes the difference between a good writer and a great writer is perception,
Yeah,
how people perceive you.
how you're perceived, yes. And there are people who have great reputations who just work and work and work. Um, and people who are really, really talented who don't have reputations who don't get their breaks. So, you know, there are points in this show where we can just talk about the writing process and we'll just talk about how to make good writing. That's really all we can really control as writers.
Right.
Write a really good script. That's
Right.
what we can do. But all the other things are there. And the more you can maneuver and use all the other factors, the greater your chances are of succeeding. So, yes, you can be just a really wonderful writer and work here and there, whatever. But if you ever want to run a show, you got to start playing the psychological games to a certain extent
Hmm.
and the manipulation to a certain extent if you want to get to the top of the show. if you if you want to work more, it helps too. But if you just are just a dedicated artist, writer, and that's all you want to do, then do it.
Hmm.
But you're still going to have to do a little bit to impress people, I would still prepare for my pitch sessions. I would still write something out just to put in your brain clearly, even if, and clearly do not read from that thing you've written out. Do not memorize it. And then go in the room well prepared. If you go into a room well prepared, it will impress them. One of the things that people are always impressed with is confidence, and you have more confidence when you've prepared. If
Hmm.
you go into a room unprepared, you're going to lack certain confidence, and you're not going to always be able to answer a question quickly enough, and whatever that you would do if you had prepared. So, my advice is, no matter whether you're extroverted or introverted, um, yeah, prepare for your pitches because those are really important. It's hard to get a pitch. When you get a pitch meeting, make it count. Make it count by impressing those people, by preparing for it. You can't just rely on your talent. You just can't do it.
Yeah, and it's better to be aware of the circumstances that you're going into and embrace them a little bit rather than just rejecting them and hoping everybody changes to your way of thinking. And you know, and like when it comes to like executives and stuff like that, those people are sharks, you know, like they're dealing with a much more cutthroat type of environment. So you want to like, you know, like build their respect a little bit so that that way they think
Yeah,
you can take, you know, take charge when necessary.
yeah. Like on your way in, like trip their assistant or something,
Hmm.
so he falls on his ass and they kick him in the butt.
Yeah.
This is the kind of guy.
Try to send them for coffee or something like that. You know, you want to show them who's boss.
I've never been good at doing that, and
Yeah.
I really started out really soft spoken, and they turned me into this gregarious, wonderful entertainer. But uh, I could always write, and I did prepare, like I've said to do. I did go into all my meetings well prepared. Um, but I was not, and I can tell you, I really was. I was never been an extroverted person. I can talk about things I know without being intimidated, and maybe speak like I'm extroverted, but I'm really not that personality. I just uh, I just prepare. I if I go into a meeting unprepared, I lose a lot of confidence. And people love confidence. I keep saying that because it's true. People love being with somebody who's confident if they believe that person really knows what they're doing, and they're almost are more interested in the confidence than anything else because it makes them more comfortable. It makes them feel more at ease, especially in a
Hmm.
rewrite room, that you're a confident contributor. So the thing I would say is never go into a room looking like you're just grateful to be there. Well, it's okay to be grateful to be there, but just grateful to be there, and you don't really know if you earned it or deserve it.
Hmm.
Always feel you earned it and deserved it, or you wouldn't be there. And
Hmm.
so they don't want some guy to say, I think I can do that. Well,
Hmm.
I'll try. I'll do my best. I'll do my best.
Yeah.
And if you don't
Right.
like it, they don't want that. They want you to say, I understand exactly what you're looking for, and I know how to do it. I'm gonna, I'll do it for you. I've got it.
Hmm.
They love that because it just makes them feel like, wow, they don't have to worry about it, and they don't have to spend spend extra energy. Which brings me to a story that I wanted to tell. Is because when I first started, I already knew that some because I had done stand up comedy, and stand up comedy is a lot of manipulation of audiences. So I
Hmm.
already had the sense of, if you go in timid, like you don't know what you're doing. If you're playing a timid character, that's different, and
Right.
they catch on to it. If you go in like the real person, but you're not comfortable on the stage, they get uncomfortable with
Right.
you on the stage. And
Totally.
if you're not comfortable in the delivery of your joke, they aren't comfortable enough to laugh at something
Hmm.
that's a mediocre joke because you present as though you think it's a mediocre joke.
Right.
So um, what I used to do is, when I first started, if somebody said we need something, I'd always say I can do it, I can do it, and then whether I knew I could actually do it or not, um, I would do it. And more usually you pull that off because you're not going to volunteer for something like somebody says, can you build a spaceship to get me to Mars?
Hmm.
Well, I can do it, I can do it. Well, that doesn't work there. But when somebody says in a room, if you can get us in this plot development to this particular point, we'll be able to find the conclusion of the story. Then you can say, I can do it, I can do it, because then you that's what you do. You're a writer. You make up stories. You make up development. So I remember one time, one of our executive producers on a show I was on said, we couldn't find the ending to the show. We had the ending, but we didn't have the setup to the climax. We didn't have
Hmm.
the setup for kind of the punchline that the climax was. I'm saying it in terms of jokes, and you know what a climax is, so I'm not going to explain that. But the setup to that would lead to a climax wasn't working, and nobody could figure out the lines with the characters we had and the development we had. And somebody finally said, "Well, if this character said, 'Do it for the duck,' and that worked as inspiration for our lead character, that'd be funny and people would go with it." And I remember everybody in the room went, "I don't understand what is that a metaphor for something? I don't understand what he's do it for the duck."
Hmm.
Um, but I did do that. I said, "Well," and everybody was tired. It was late night, and we just needed that moment. So I just said, "I can do it." And I figured I'd do something. And if it turned out it wasn't exactly what they wanted, they'd say, "Oh well, you missed it." And I was new, and I don't think anybody would have hated me for not getting it. But I had a chance to be impressive to these people. So
Hmm.
I said, "I can do it," and I did it. I figured out a way to get to the lead character in the scene saying, "Do it for the duck," and it making sense in the story where it was a metaphor of sorts based on a true event
Hmm.
that I set up, and I invented the setup, and I did it in front of all the other writers right there spontaneously. They said, "Okay, how are you going to get to it?" And I had no idea I was going to get to it, but I acted like I knew exactly what I was doing and where I was going, and I managed to pull it off. And as I said, if I'd gotten to a point where I got stuck, I think one of the other people who were glad that I had had gotten the wheels turning again, would have probably jumped in and helped out. It
Hmm.
wasn't a huge risk,
Yeah.
um, but it did gain me some real good points with some of the older writers. I was young, very young then, and the ones who didn't trust me because they thought I was too young were impressed that I just went in like I had all this experience, and I knew from experience that I could do this thing that I didn't really know I could do, but I thought I could do it because it was writing, and I was pretty confident with my ability to write. But I came into it as though I was sure I could do it. You want do it for the duck? I can do it for the duck. And inside I'm going, "Shut the fuck up, Ken. What
Oh,
are you
really?
doing? Yeah, what are you saying? You're getting into big trouble here."
I didn't know
But
if
I
you had like I was wondering. I was wondering when you were saying that. Did you have a spark for the idea? Like, did you have any inclination, like, oh, it could go this route, or and when they said yes, go ahead and do it. What was the outcome of that circumstance?
when they first said go ahead and do it, I knew that I could get to a situation where you ask somebody to do something based on a slogan that a child had saying "Do it for the duck." That much I
Okay.
knew.
Okay.
So getting it into these adults to say this thing as an inspiration from one adult to another was going to be the trick.
Hmm.
And without going into it, because it takes a long time to develop to explain it all, but I was able to make that from a kid who had a pet duck that had been hit by a car, and he was trying to get it to the vet,
Hmm.
and he couldn't make the distance because he was a little kid and he's running his heart out, and
Hmm.
the duck's dying, and he kept saying to himself, do it for the duck." But he
Hmm.
wasn't saying do it for the duck. The duck had a name, so he was saying do it for Dewey or whatever the duck's name was.
Right.
But I changed that to do it for the duck, for the adult to say it, so it
Hmm.
wasn't a silly childhood name. But I'm saying I was making it up as I was going along without knowing I was going to get to an ending that would work, and I did. And when I did, all these senior writers in the room suddenly started listening to me when I'd pitch ideas or when I'd
Hmm.
had a criticism of something or an idea. Um, when I first took over running the show, there were a few of the older writers who didn't want to meet with me as a showrunner because they thought I was too young, and they'd been around for a long time. They want to take notes from some young kid who shouldn't know anything. But after that night, they were all there. They were all part of the staff. Not all of them. Most of them were there, part of the staff. And after that, they just treated me like one of them.
Hmm. Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, so I'm saying if you get an opportunity like that, go for it. Now, don't go for it if you have absolutely no idea where you're going and you think that's deadly. But I had some idea. I just didn't know I could pull it off. But I pretended I knew I could pull it off.
and
Does that
it
make
changed.
sense? Yeah.
Yeah, and it changed their perception of you. So
Hmm.
or like what it sounds like. So they gained a little bit more respect for you. And in that sense, did you was it easy sailing from then on out, and no more roadblocks or hangups, or was it kind of?
Well, the business always has some kind of roadblock somewhere,
Hmm.
but it did help a lot. And then I won a few awards, and that helped too. And also I worked on some really good shows. I mean, some
Hmm.
series that were really well respected, so that got helped. A lot of things will help, and we've talked about this before. A certain element of luck is important in the
Hmm.
business, but you can improve your luck by giving yourselves more chances. For example, buying 100 lottery tickets
Hmm.
instead of 10.
Yeah.
So if you if you have a number of these things going for you, then it improves your chances that you'll make your own luck, and something will develop from one of these. And but there is a certain element of luck. I once heard Eddie Murphy when he's first starting. He was brand new, and he had gotten huge break. I think he was only 19 when he got his first major motion picture, and somebody asked him, and he said, "Well, I'm really talented, but I needed a bit of luck." And
Hmm.
I remember, wow, that's really cool that he said that. And so I say that too. I had luck. I really know I'm a good writer, and I had a lot of talent coming in, but I had a few moments of big luck. But I made them happen by. I mean, you make the first ones happening by writing some spec scripts and sending them out to people, send them out to agents, whomever. If you don't send them out, then there's no chance you can have luck. Maybe somebody will be lost in your building and knock on your door and say, "Excuse me, I'm looking for a writer. Is there a
Hmm.
writer in this room?"
I'm looking for
Uh,
someone to make famous for
yeah,
this craft. Yeah.
your odds there are very low. But
Hmm.
um, the more chances you put yourself out there into a real situation, even and that was sort of that was a joke, but I know of somebody who made a successful movie because they met producer by cleaning the pool of the neighbor. They were cleaning the neighbor's pool and got in a conversation and ended up impressing this person enough to read a script. So any opportunity you have to get your script read or get an opportunity to pitch to somebody or volunteer to do something somebody else doesn't want to do, like writing that final scene or whatever, all those things help to make that moment of luck come, because you'll be in the ballpark where luck happens. I mean, you'll be
Hmm.
there. You'll be one of the you'll be in you'll have tickets in the lottery, as opposed to somebody who has no tickets in the lottery or only has a few tickets in the lottery. So improve your odds by trying these things. Write your spec scripts. Talk to people who maybe know people who know people who know people. As
Hmm.
long as your script is registered at the Writers Guild, or as a you have a copyright through the U.S. Copyright Office, your script's protected. Then let anybody read it. If the guy driving the bus on the way in happens to say something about the show he saw, and then you find out he actually has some people who have taken the bus who once now are famous or whatever, and he knows who they are. It's still worth a conversation with the guy. That might be the one that turns out to be your luck. The guy really does know somebody who still connects to them. Like, Joe Biden still knows everybody on the train he used to travel to and from Washington when he was a senator. Um, so just do it, then you'll
Hmm.
be president of the United States someday.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting because in a couple of moves, you were able to establish yourself as a more respected writer. Whereas,
Yes.
prior to you just, if you had just sat there quietly and not
It would
taken a
have been
bold step.
it would have been very easy to do that. I mean, nobody else in the room wanted to venture to say that they could do that. And I saw it as an opportunity. I mean, it's just laying out there for me. I may blow it,
Hmm.
but I can try. It's out there. I've got a chance to grab the gold ring on the ride, because um, it's out there. And so I grabbed it. I said, okay, I can do it. And that's what I recommend doing. A lot of you who don't want to have to do that aggressive kind of behavior are going to say, maybe writing is not for me. And I don't want to discourage you because, as I said, some writers, I've known some writers who are not very aggressive. I'm not aggressive by nature, but I was able to do this. Some people can't even, won't even do that much aggression and still have had good careers, but not the great careers. The great careers take people who grab the ring, grab the ring on the ride and say, I'm going to do it. And you have to do that. And even if you're shy, you can do that when you think, boy, if I do that, I could get I get these things I want. If I just sit back and remain shy, we don't always do things that are exactly who we are. And we're
Hmm.
polite to people that we don't want to be polite to sometimes. And we compliment people who we don't want to compliment, or we don't, or you tell your girlfriend or your wife or your boyfriend or whoever that they look really nice that day when they don't look so nice, but they're not feeling well.
Hmm.
These white lies we do that are helpful, there's nothing wrong with those. They're built on a positive energy as opposed to lying to get something that will hurt somebody else. This is just, it's part of the process. You have to manipulate a little bit. You have to psych people out a little bit. Um, and
It's
I
a
know
lot of
what people
catering to
say.
people's egos, like if you're talking to a director, you have to, again, like win them over so that way they have that vision that you have, because they have their own vision, and they
Yeah,
want to take things in their own way. And it's like, sometimes that works for the story if you're
yeah,
working with people who are really solid. But if you work for, if you're discussing it with people who aren't seeing your vision, you have to figure out a way to kind of let them lean into your idea and like take it as their own, so then they start to get enthusiastic about it.
yeah. But sometimes you have to figure out, some people will respond better to being aggressive with them, and some
Hmm.
will want you to be more humble. Like, you could go to a director and say, you're doing this character completely wrong. This is terrible.
Hmm.
The director's going to shut you out right now. Boom, you're gone.
Right, totally.
Unless you're a big shot already who can get away with that.
Hmm.
It'd be better if you went and said, I've been watching this and this idea comes to me. I'd just like to run it by you.
Hmm.
That's a more positive approach, and like you're respecting the person rather than telling him he's or he or she is a fool or screwed up.
Hmm.
So, yeah, but you've all gotten this far along in life by having to do a little bit of acting. We're all actors to some degree. We all do that to some degree.
But it helps to be spelled out, I think, because sometimes it's like until you hear someone articulate it outside of your own head, it's like, oh, okay, like, oh, yeah, like I think the way you phrase that, like, oh, instead of being like, your choice of this actor doesn't, is not working, it's not right for the role. Like if you're too direct, sometimes it can really harm your chances of being heard, and the
Yeah,
indirect path can definitely help sometimes. And in terms of being a writer, a lot of people have a perception about writers before they even, like when they let us out of the cave and we can mingle amongst the betters, then you get a chance to see like, oh, you're not that different. But they have a
yeah,
perception of writers that is very unusual. And if you're in film, it's like you're not that, you
yeah. In
know,
film, you're really just a hired hand. In
yeah.
the TV business, writers are the running factors. They're the people who make decisions about the show because it moves so quickly from episode to episode that they have to have writers in charge. And so it got to be that way, that the ultimate top person, the showrunner, is always a writer in television. But in movie business, very, very few writers have a lot of clout. Um,
Kind of an
I think,
afterthought.
what I think is kind of funny to me, has always been weird, is that they always call the actors the talent. They say,
Hmm.
"Okay, we'll send all the stuff out to the talent,"
Hmm.
but that doesn't include anybody but the actors. And you go, "Wait a minute, we're all talent. The writers are
Right.
talent, the directors are talent, the art directors are talent,
Yeah, that's
but
a
they
talent.
they refer to the actors as the talent."
Hmm.
And so and writers are kind of like the necessary people who lay the foundation and like, you're going to do a skyscraper, and the people they pay all the attention to are the people who are going to do the final decorating of the apartments.
Hmm.
But they're nowhere without the guy who laid the foundation, put in the concrete, and put in the steel and built up this thing that they can decorate. So It's a very funny business in that regard, but you can't get sensitive about that either, where you're offended that they don't call you the talent. They call you, you're the Writers Guild, and you have a writer's agent, but other people have a talent agent. They're the talent, and they're
You're still above the line though, so that's cool. You know, you get that. Um, you know,
and we have
viewpoint.
we have more longevity. We writers make most often have careers where they make more money in the long run
Hmm.
than actors who tend to have a successful show and then they kind of disappear, or
Hmm.
some have a couple successful shows. But the writers can go from show to show to show for a whole lifetime. Um, so you can make a lot of money. You can make more money than the actors. You can be more important to a project than the actors, but the actors are still the talent, and you're part of the writers, part of the
I'm,
staff, the writers staff.
I mean, it sounds, like it seems like, like part of what the discussion is today is like, there's a lot of other skills involved than just being somebody who's great with punctuation and word usage and plotting and stuff like that. There's
That's what
a
they think we are. Sometimes I think that's what we do. We're really about rhetoric. We're really about creating the impact of the words. But and they and I mean I have friends who are actors and I have friends who are directors. I mean, it's not like there's a hostility, but there is a sense. What I'm saying is, but we're all doing all these things. You have to be a little bit of an actor
hmm
and a writer, and you have to also be a little bit of a manipulator and these other things. So the writer really has to be able to do a lot of things, but that's why you're a writer, because you're used to using words to manipulate people's emotions and creating stories from nothing and building and building and building. So with those talents you have, you also have to use them to be smart with moving people around, not just words.
It was interesting what you said though. Is like, we're, you didn't phrase it exactly this way, but you're like masters of the rhetoric. Like what you're doing with the writing itself is the impact that it has, not just the the minutia of like, oh, this person used this, because I like a lot of
Oh
like,
yeah.
I'll get hung up on like phrasing, like I think Elvis Costello has really interesting phrasing for some of his songs. And, I do like certain writers for their way of flipping a sentence, and you watch that flow and everything, and that's really fun. But the main thing is, how did that piece of work make you feel? Writers, as a writer, I don't know if
Right.
that's just my interest, is that little small stuff, which is really exciting to me. But when I watch a film, or we went and watched Cruella the other day at the AMC theater down the street from our house. And Disney's not really like a genre for me, but this is like a darker Disney film. And I walked away thinking like, wow, that was fucking great. That was a really awesome movie. I hadn't been to the theaters in over a year or something like that, but that was fun. I was like excited. So
Yeah.
that was cool. I mean, I could have gotten into the nitpicky stuff of like, this thing or that thing, the costumes and yada yada yada. But the impact, that rhetoric part, that's kind of wanted to.
But you're talking about for that genre.
Yeah.
Obviously, Corella isn't Schindler's List,
Right. Yeah.
but for what it is, it can be done so well that you enjoy it, and if you suspend your disbelief in whatever genre you're jumping into for whatever amount of disbelief you have to, you know, uh, eliminate this for the disbelief to not interfere, you can enjoy things that are kids movies. I've taken my daughter over the years to many kids movies that I've enjoyed because I go into that genre, and for that genre, this is great. They did this genre great.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I've been surprised sometimes that I'll see a movie with my daughter and really like it. A kids movie I'd never go to see on my own.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, and that's kind of like, back in, I guess it's different now because we all have streaming TVs in a way, but like when you used to flip to the channels and you'd land on a movie and or something, some TV show, and you weren't expecting to like it. And then next thing you know, you're like 6 or 7 seasons
Yeah,
deep or whatever,
yeah.
like I was doing research for a book that I was working on a while ago. And I'm not really, when I was a kid, I was big into vampires and stuff, but as an
Uh-huh.
adult, that's not really my genre. I don't watch that much vampire stuff.
Yeah.
And I started watching what was the name of that show? Some kind of vampire show. Of course, now that I bring it up, I
Was
can't
that the one
remember.
in the dark or something, or what are you
No, it
talking? In
was
the shadows, or
Vampire Diaries.
oh, Vampire
You
Diaries.
ever seen
Yeah,
that?
I haven't, but I've heard about it. Yeah.
Wow, that was fucking way better than I thought. I actually ended up watching all
Uh,
9 seasons. You know, it was well beyond like my necessity for the research. You know, I was just like, this is a fucking cool show. I got like really caught up in the characters, and
yeah.
and I was like, oh, this is some good writing. Like, this is fun. It's engaging.
Yeah, you gotta know. Like I can't write kids movies. There's a talent to that. That's very
Yeah.
special, and I appreciate it when I see like some kid books. I used to love reading Dr. Seuss to my daughter, though I know he's in trouble now,
Yeah.
but
Did he get canceled?
uh, yeah, Dr. Seuss has been canceled. No,
Oh, that's sad.
'cause some of his books have though. But anyhow, um, yeah, if you pick a genre you love, whether it's sci-fi or rom-coms or strict dramas, uh, or kids movies, you just got to do it really well.
Yeah.
You can't just say, well, it's a kids movie, so I don't have to think about continuity and things like that. You do. You have to make it right. The kids get it, and if they don't get it, their parents sitting watching it with them get it, and it all plays back. It all affects how successful your movie is. So there's a lot of things in the business that we're talking about. So you're kind of an actor. You kind of have to be flexible enough to be able to go from one genre to another. You have to be open-minded. You have to be a little bit of a psychologist. Um,
Psychology, yeah, is a big part of it.
Psychology is important. Yeah, you have to know who you can't offend. I've had more than twice. So that'd be three times.
Hmm.
Uh, I've had shows canceled because somebody offended the wrong people, and those were times where I didn't do it because I was sitting back and saying and seeing who I shouldn't do that to, and somebody else I didn't expect, who was a loose cannon
Hmm.
in all three cases, says something really wrong or pursued it further than just saying it
Hmm.
to somebody who controlled the purse strings and pulled the plug on a project. So,
Yeah.
yeah, you got all these factors involved besides writing.
Yeah, that's the thing too, is that even though you are creating a large portion of the framework for the show, you're giving the foundation, you're creating in some cases you're creating the show, right? So you have a certain amount of control and power in that station, but if you're not paying for it, then you are at the mercy of somebody else who is willing to put that money up, so, and pay the
Um,
staff and all these other people. So yeah, you do have to be careful, who it is that you're speaking to. I mean, it's like that with any walk of life, really. It's not just writing, but it
yeah,
does,
no, that's true.
it does, you
But
know
so I think somehow people think more, maybe perhaps because it's an art form, that if you have a great piece of art, that's enough. But it usually isn't. It
yeah, it's
usually
not
is.
just talent alone. It's not that's what makes it a business. It's
Yeah.
I mean, if you're just going to be a great writer, you can just be a great writer by yourself, and then people can read it if they ever come across it, or you could
Or
self-publish
if
or
you get
something.
lucky, sometimes it happens. Sometimes somebody who isn't very vocal and is unable to be demonstrative does get a break where they get in there. I have met some very quiet, mild mannered people who've gotten very far
Hmm.
to the top, toward the top or all the way to the top by just doing the right thing at the right time, or just being steady and somebody you can count on enough, and it can happen. But you just increase your odds, you improve your chances, you give yourself more opportunity for those strokes of luck if you do all these things to
Hmm.
some degree. It doesn't mean you have to be a great actor. I'm a terrible actor, and when I have to memorize lines and do them, they always come across as lines. But
Hmm.
if I give myself a bunch of talking points to go into pitch and don't memorize them, I do very well with that.
Yeah, a little bit more off the cuff. Did you ever do
Yeah.
improv or anything, or did you ever try anything like that?
I did stand up comedy where we had our acts were written out, but would improvise sometimes a little bit, dealing with hecklers and stuff. But I never was in an improv group where I actually had to somebody threw out an idea and I had to improvise it on the spot because I really am not an actor. That's not what I do, and
Yeah.
I'd be better helping an actor by huddling with the actors and maybe coming up with some ideas for them. But I never really had the desire after I saw what the structure of the business was to move from where I was as a writer producer to an actor on the other side of the camera. Um, because you have more control. You really have more control of your career and of the project as a writer than you do as an actor.
You're right.
Actors do have to take a lot of abuse and manipulation, not only from the writing but also from the a director or uh, things from uh, bad press or ratings or whatever. Somebody says you're not sexy enough or you're not.
Mhm.
Uh, so
Did you ever hear
being
that? Like when you were in the writing room, you would pitch an idea and somebody said that you weren't sexy enough or anything like
Yeah,
that?
yeah, yeah. I had that.
Yeah.
But actually, the truth is they do that sometimes because they use the word sexy when they mean exciting and hot and fresh and new and all those things you think of with sex. So I've heard them say that about a writer. Oh, this is a really sexy writer,
Hmm.
and they don't really mean it.
Interesting.
You go, "Ooh, I'm looking forward to meeting this
Yeah,
person,"
yeah.
and then
Let me get lubed
somebody
up.
comes in, and yeah, no. So they do use the term sexy when they mean sometimes just energetic, exciting,
Yeah.
fresh, all that. But uh, I've never lost a job for not being sexy enough, though.
Yeah, it's got to be tough to be an actor, because so much of acting isn't just your talent. I mean, there's a lot of fields in the showbiz that's not just your talents, but
Yeah,
for actors, it's like you just walk in there and you could be talented as fuck, and you're the wrong look. You're just not the look that they need to fulfill that role. And
absolutely.
there's nothing you
And
can do about that.
sometimes I have an interesting thing. I may have told this one of our other 10,000 episodes, but uh, that that I once had to fire an Oscar-winning actor before the person had won an Oscar because people said, "You either fire this one actor or we're going to shut the whole show down." And it was based on one person's opinion. And those of us who thought this actor was wonderful turned out to be right because the person went on to win a couple Oscars. Um, but at the time, we had a choice: either fire this person or shut down the whole show and put 150 people out of work. You put one person out of work or 150 people. They put it to me that way when I was running the show.
Yeah.
So I had to fire this person who was a wonderful actor who could have thought I must be a terrible actor because I just got fired from a pilot. They're really going to reshoot the whole pilot.
Hmm.
I must be so bad that they would spend that much money to replace me. It was only because two key people perceived that, but they were the two people at the top of the network and the studio, and they came together and said, "We got to get rid of this person," and they were dead wrong, totally, completely flipped backward wrong. But this person had to survive that moment of getting fired from a show and thinking, "Wow, what's wrong with me?"
Hmm.
And it was nothing. There was nothing wrong with that person. That person, as I said, went on to win a couple Oscars.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people get fired a lot, and from different projects. It's a very, it's not a stable um, job market, really. It's a very, and each thing is, short lived. Every single project you're on is eventually going to stop at some point,
Yeah.
unless it's Days of Our Lives, which I think is still running almost nearly as long as our podcast has been running.
Well, The Simpsons has run that long too.
Yeah. I mean, certain people on The Simpsons are locked in, right? Because they have that voice. But do you think they just have them read the alphabet or something like that, just in case, just to say every word in
Uh,
the dictionary so they could
yeah.
manipulate that stuff later?
I don't know what um I don't know what it's like to be an actor. I wouldn't want to be an actor. I just think as hard as it is to be a writer, it's that much harder to be an actor because um at least with a writer you can change, you can change if you're not good looking enough as an actor and you're those are the kind of parts people are sending you out on, you're not going to get the part. Where the writer, you can be more flexible. You can, if your character isn't uh a certain way isn't aggressive enough or isn't passive enough, you can make him more aggressive or passive in your writing. It's just so much easier, I think, to make up for your deficits as a writer, or perceived deficits from from those who are judging you.
Hmm.
I've been judged many times incorrectly, that I've had proof later on where the same project sells or the same idea works somewhere else, or I've won an award for a script somebody said was no good. So I know from personal experience that you can't let that sort of thing stop you. I say if you write a script and you ask 10 friends what they think, and all 10 friends say it's a piece of crap, it's probably not very good.
Oh, I was
But
thinking it's
it,
time to find an 11th friend, actually.
yeah, that's a good idea. But if if three people say it's crap and seven say it's great, then you got to start figuring out, who are these people who thought it was crap, who these people you start weighing things. More often, you're going to get like five will think it's good, five will think it's not so good, or three will think it's great, and three will think it's mediocre, and three will think it's terrible. So you got all these things working against you, working to influence you, and you've got to have the confidence to believe in your own talent because, as I said, I've had at least I've had several times where somebody didn't want something that I wrote, and then later on, somebody else wanted it very much. So
Don't you think too you run into a danger like when you get a lot of readers and you start doing rewrites based on these readings, these critiques that you're getting, then it's like sometimes that actually makes the story worse because you're writing to one direction and it's like that wasn't really the issue, depending on, the sophistication of the reader, how well they are at how good they are at targeting the actual problem, like, oh, this character is not it's this scene is not fulfilling because the character did XYZ earlier, instead of just being like, I don't like it or whatever. I think this guy, he should be like, a potato farmer or something, like they just, and you're like, well, fuck, if a potato farmer is what you need, I'll start writing to
yeah,
this guy being a potato farmer. Like you can. And I think like there's like people who say like, um I've heard like information where it's like, you know get read often and early, early in the process and often, which I
yeah,
can be good advice. But at the same time, until you've really honed that particular piece of work, I kind of feel like it's a danger because you start getting too many chefs in the kitchen, and
yeah,
it can derail the original spark. And sometimes that needs to happen, but it can derail the original spark of, the driving force behind the actual,
yeah.
the momentum of the piece, and that can hurt it.
You have to, yeah, you have to believe in yourself. But that example I use, like if 10 for 10 people say you're this is bad, it probably is bad.
Sure.
Um, but you can't get discouraged because somebody didn't like it, or several people didn't like it, or several people loved it. So now you don't believe anybody else when they say it needs rewriting.
Right.
No,
Yeah.
because these people loved it. No, well, these
Yeah.
people were wrong. It did need the rewriting. So you got to be you're the guy. You're the guy or the gal. You're the one who makes the choice. So you have to be. It has to be your decision.
And
So
also
don't you?
too, like you think like, sometimes um people can't see that vision that you have. Like you said, that there's people who have told you like a particular piece didn't work and they end up
Yeah,
working, and
yeah,
it's like in the right hands at the right time with the right push behind it, that piece actually will come to fruition and actually
yeah,
do the thing it's supposed to do. Whereas like somebody else, that might not be their particular frame of thinking, or they want to go in some other direction, and it's like they don't see that vision the same way you. That's why it's
right,
good to have a
right,
unique
right.
voice and like, hey, actually I see this as being funny, this is funny to me. And then when you actually see it played out, if it's played out correctly, then it will be funny, but it's
Yeah,
that may not still actually play for somebody else. That's part of the
true, true.
the roller
And
coaster of
I've
writing.
had I like to point to examples that are very tangible examples for people when I'm talking to people who want to get in business. And one of them, and another one, just because it's so extreme to show how it can be subjective, is that um, I did a show where one of my characters, the woman I hired to play the neighbor next door, was 2 years earlier Miss Universe,
Mm.
which is was its own. That was a title owned at the time by Paramount. Paramount owned the Miss Universe contest.
Hmm.
Well, the note I got from the head of ABC at the time was, well, the woman playing the neighbor isn't attractive enough.
Mm-hmm.
And then I said, well, 2 years ago she was Miss Universe.
Mm-hmm.
And they completely reversed themselves. Just learning that shouldn't have affected their judgment. If they thought she wasn't attractive enough, why learning that she had won this big award change their opinion? It's because they didn't really have a legitimate opinion in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
They were just trying to make some comments because a lot of people do that too. They have to have some input into the project because they're getting paid a lot to do that. So
Mm-hmm.
if the head of the network says to you, this character is not attractive enough, and because she was playing the neighbor, we weren't playing her in a real glamorous, sexy way. She just had her natural beauty, Miss Universe beauty, which was she was a very beautiful woman.
Mm-hmm.
But we just played it as a normal person. We didn't play for the beauty. And then we get a note, replace this woman. She's not attractive enough. And then are able to overcome that by just saying she has this title. It says she's the most beautiful woman in the world. And they go, oh, okay. You go, well, then none of that making any sense. None of that made
Yeah.
any sense on any level.
Yeah, because I'm, first of all, attraction is subjective, but it's just a weird thing to be. Do you think that they were just like, well, I don't want to say that again because she's Miss Universe, but they might have still held that view? That could have been, you know what I
You
mean?
know what I
But
think the case was? I think what they meant in this particular case was the person who felt that liked women who were more sexually uh, demonstrative or more uh, aggressive in their sexuality. And we were playing this person as kind of this demure neighbor.
hmm
And though she was very pretty, that wasn't the point of it. We liked her sense of innocence that the actress chose to play. But to this person, he wanted a hot mama.
yeah,
I don't know who he was. I do know who he was, but I'm not gonna mention. But he wanted this hot woman, this hot somebody, and she was just this gorgeous. And she wasn't playing that kind of part. Even I'm just saying, there can be all kinds of reasons for somebody telling you you're wrong, and they're wrong,
hmm
or nobody's wrong because all perspective. And some people will feel that person's way, and some will feel your way. And it brings me back to the same point I've reiterated several times in this little section, is that you have to count on your own judgment. Doesn't
hmm
mean you have to be arrogant. Do never get arrogant. Be confident and trust your judgment, but not so arrogant that when somebody tells you it's wrong and 8 of your 10 friends say it's wrong, that you don't seriously consider maybe you are wrong and you want to make some changes in it.
hmm
Um, but when 8 of 10 say you're wrong, they still 8 can still be wrong. You can still be the right one. You and the other two. It's so tricky. It's so tricky. So you got to
Yeah,
be
it is weird.
confident.
And then,
Yeah.
going jumping back onto the thing about the actors too, and like how tough it is. I mean, geez, like you again, she's you're talented, and somebody's just like, oh, I like brunettes, and she's a blonde or what have you. You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then you run the risk of getting fired. It's just you're like, oh, I could dye my hair, and they're like, oh, it's just not good enough. I have to have a natural blonde. Like
Yeah, you get stuff like that. You get the craziest kinds of reasoning for. I was on a show where somebody hired. This is going to sound terrible too, but when somebody hired an actress because they wanted to date her.
yeah, well,
You
I'm sure
go,
that happens quite a bit
oh, I'm
actually.
sure it happens a lot, but I mean, I've had firsthand experience where I saw it happen. Dated and the person did date her, and eventually they became a couple. And but that's the wrong reason. That's totally the wrong reason. That means somebody else lost the job
hmm
because he wanted to date this other woman, not because that woman was necessarily the best. And maybe she would have been the best. But again, you may lose the job just because they want to give the job to somebody else who's connected and you're not.
hmm
So
Be
that's why
dateable.
it's a
That's the
yeah,
thing. Be dateable.
yeah, yeah. That's a tough. So that's why it's tough. It's very tough to being an artist is a tough field. Any art, whether you're
hmm
fine art painter or you're a
Is it though?
director
Like, I mean,
or
you're a painter, right? Like, do they go through this shit? I've never heard one of my painter friends say like, oh, I wasn't attractive enough, for this particular canvas.
yeah.
Like,
I
I
don't
don't.
think that I think the painters do that, but I do. I have seen people look at at abstract art in particular and say, this is wonderful and this isn't.
Yeah.
And I'll look at the same two and I'll say, gosh, I like the other one better or whatever. And
Yeah.
I'm sure they go through that. I'm sure they paint a picture and they say, oh, it's derivative or it's,
Oh, well, that's a word that people love to use when it comes to stuff
yeah,
like
or
that.
it's
Yeah.
not, it's just not inspired. You go, how do you know what's inspired or not inspired? I was
Yeah.
inspired to paint a bowl of apples.
Yeah.
Why can't I have been inspired to paint a bowl of apples?
I mean, there's
You don't know.
millions of paintings of bowls of apples. You know what I mean? How is that? How are you that inspired by that bowl of apples? All around the world, people are just like, I fucking love bowls of
Yeah, yeah,
apples. You
yeah.
know,
And
this
then
is
they
the
see your bowl of apples. They
yeah.
go,
Holy
oh,
shit.
I've never seen a bowl of apples
Yeah,
before. Like, this is really what a bowl of apples should look like.
that's like real life apples right there.
Because sitcoms are a lot like that. Because sitcoms are very, very familiar. A lot of the stories are very familiar, and you have to find twists and turns. So even if you're doing a familiar story or a familiar situation, yours does not feel the same as the other. Somebody might say, "Oh, that's like something," but they
Hmm.
won't say that is that other project. So you've got to find twists and turns because there are so many episodes of TV shows that have been written, and besides the movies that have been written and the plays that have been done, that everything's been done. And I know some people say, "Well, that's not." No, everything has been. Well, everything's been done if you start looking at the basic elements and you start
Yeah,
looking
for
what put
sure.
together. But everything is different when you bring your own voice, your own personality, your own preferences, your own perspective to the project. Even if it's the same plot, it doesn't necessarily look like the same story when you've executed it.
That's the
So
cool thing about it, actually, is finding that little tweak. You know, like you're saying, like with
yeah,
the, do it for the duck. It's like you find this little tweak that gets you there. That's different than because Boy Meets Girl or whatever. That's how many fucking bowls
yeah,
of apples is that fulfilled? You know what I mean? That's
yeah.
all
Boy
around the
meets
world.
girl, then they don't get along. They
Yeah.
like it, then they don't get along, then they come together, then they break up terribly, and at
Hmm.
the end they come together. I mean, that is a typical rom-com for movies and television.
Hmm.
But you can see the same one done, 1,000 ways, and they all feel different because of the specifics are different enough. So you can't anticipate it. The ending might be inevitable, but
Hmm.
not predictable. That's important. The path may be inevitable, but again, not predictable. As long as it's not predictable, then you've got a new story.
But people also people forget that people tune into those genres for that arc. Like they want that arc. It's not they don't mind being surprised along the way, but if your surprise is, boy meets girl, they argue, they get together, they don't get together, they get together, they don't get together, and then they finally get together. If that's what you're tuning in for, and then like they don't get together and they fucking break up and she goes this
Yeah,
way and this guy becomes trans or whatever. That's, like for people who want those stories, that's great. But for people who are looking for that arc that they're used to, they're not going to be satisfied with that story. You know what I mean? They're gonna be like, well,
yeah,
you just went in some fucking totally different way. And yeah, like that's the thing about like half-hour comedies, and especially like, like a family. How many family shows are there? Like where you have, this character has a problem at school, or this, character has a problem at work, or like this happens a million times. But
yeah,
people are tuning in to see. I don't know that they're necessarily tuning in to see like, how does this character solve these problems? Maybe I can relate that to my real life, and then I'll go tell my boss to, go screw himself because this is what happened on Jim and Nancy or whatever it is. You know what I mean?
yeah,
But it is fascinating, like how drawn we are to things that are familiar, and we just want a little bit of a change. It doesn't have to be this wild reinvention of the wheel every single time.
yeah. Right. And they always point to the fact that a lot of maybe all of Shakespeare's works were derivative in some respect from Greek plays,
Right.
Greek and other mythologies.
Hmm.
I'm not sure of all the mythologies that Shakespeare was exposed to, but certainly classic Greek and others show up in his work. And but they're different. And look at even his work, how many times it's been done differently. Romeo and Juliet has been done in so many different stories, so many different,
Oh yeah, for sure.
the families keep them apart, but they're in love anyhow, and then they come
Totally.
together. And there's a tragedy because of that. And West Side Story was a hugely popular musical based on on Romeo and Juliet. Nobody really said that's Romeo and Juliet. Well, people, I should say, people said that obviously was derived from that idea,
Hmm.
but I don't think somebody actually sat down and said, "Oh, I'm going to take Romeo and Juliet, make it a musical comedy." They thought we're going to take these people who grow in the slums of
Hmm.
New York, who are uh, violently opposed to each other, and have a connection between them, and it'll be a romance.
Yeah.
They may have done that entirely with it, never thinking, "Oh, this is Romeo and Juliet." At some point, they had to have thought that, but I've seen Romeo and Juliet as Romeo and Juliet played differently.
Hmm.
The same Romeo and Juliet with different actors and different directors can play differently. So
Yeah, and then that's like I mean, that trope of like, from across the tracks, the love interest that, societies that clash. I mean, Pretty in Pink, Some
yeah,
Kind of Wonderful. That's like almost like uh John Hughes's like entire catalog almost, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
he has so many different films like that maybe, and I can't say necessarily it was inspired by Shakespeare or Romeo's Juliet, but they definitely have that echo. I mean, it's something that people
yeah.
resonate with,
Oh,
across.
that's been done many times. I've seen it so many times where cross love. There are people they're from different uh, families or different social class or different races or
Totally.
different, and they come together when the others are trying to pull them apart.
Right.
And
Totally.
usually those, well, I shouldn't say usually. Sometimes they end up in tragedy. Sometimes they end up in a rom com, in a comedy,
Hmm.
with them winning out, maybe leaving the family or whatever, or maybe the family accepts them for whatever reason.
Right.
But there's so many variations that do not feel afraid to do something because somebody says, "Oh, that's Romeo and Juliet."
Hmm.
Well, when you watch it, do you exactly know everything that's going to happen, or are you surprised? If you're
Yeah.
still surprised and the outcome is inevitable but not predictable, you'll have entertained your audience.
And you can be entertained by things that you know the outcome altogether. That's why
Yeah, yeah.
you'll watch something that you enjoy, you'll watch it more than once. You already know, you've already read
How,
that
yeah.
book, you know what I mean? But you know the ending and you're like,
There
"Oh,
have
how's
been
that turn out?"
movies. I've seen movies that and some that were very successful that actually started with the ending, and then in flashbacks they tell you how they got to that ending. So you already know how it ends.
Hmm.
You take the journey of how did they get to this ending. So
I
you
like
actually see the ending
yeah.
first.
I've done that. I mean, I have a script, a script that starts off at the end and then you work your
Yeah,
way back. And I
yeah,
find those kind of stories to be fun. They're fun adventures because then it becomes more about the journey. And that's
yeah,
that,
yeah.
what do they call that?
The hero's journey.
No, 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 the dramatic irony, where
Oh, oh, uh-huh.
as a audience viewer, you already know more than what the main character knows, and so you're kind of like
Yeah,
on the edge of your seat. That's one of those writing techniques or whatever. But
yeah,
speaking of Shakespeare, right? One of the characters I've been most interested in lately, and I don't know if that's just because of the sign of the times, is Iago from Othello. How
uh-huh.
he's plotting and manipulative. We were talking about manipulation earlier, and it kind of reminded me of like, but he's openly manipulative. He's
Yeah,
openly, plotting. Like if you look at, Game of Thrones or something like that. The Spider, that guy they called the Spider, or I can't remember the other guy that died in like season 4 or something like that. But these characters that are openly manipulative, and you get to see how they like kind of interact with these different characters to
yeah,
kind of
yeah.
get what they want.
And you can get to the point where you start rooting for them to discover that the manipulation, and so
Hmm.
you're, oh no, he's going to do that to them. He's going to tell her it was because of him that happened, and then
Yeah.
you're wanting to see it cleared up and cleaned up, and so there's so many things you can do when you're a writer. You have the universe to build from, and you can take some old classic idea or a current idea and make it your own without it being plagiarism. There's only plagiarism when it's nearly beat for beat the same story.
Right.
As long as you have twists and turns, and when somebody watches it, they don't feel they just saw the same play or movie or comedy, half-hour comedy. As long as they don't say, "Oh, well, that's just that. They just did. They just." No, you don't need to worry about your stuff being derivative. I hate when people say it's derivative, so we can't do it. No, it's only bad if it's derivative in a way that makes you think you're watching the same story with maybe just different actors.
Right.
That's derivative. But when
Yeah.
you can have your audience not being able to guess what the next step is going to be, or guess that one right, but then get the next one wrong because as a writer, you've mixed those all up, and you have a happy ending instead of a sad ending, or a sad instead of the happy ending. It's just, there's so much you can do, so much. And I've seen many times where a script's not working and they'll throw out the whole script and just want to start over. And I always find that crazy, because if you have a script that almost works and so much of it's so good, you can just play with it, manipulate it yourself, and turn things and twist things. If you have this much good stuff and you can focus on the things that were a problem, I think you're better off than to start from scratch, where you're going to generate new problems and you don't have the time anymore. Now you've run out of time because you started over. I think people give up too easily. I think sometimes when they have a scene that doesn't work, or a story that doesn't work, if they've spent the time trying to figure out why it doesn't work and fixing what they have, if they've got a lot of other good things, they spend more time fixing and making it all better than starting from scratch. And the networks love to make you start from scratch. And so do the studios. They love to make you start from scratch, but every time you start from scratch, you have less time to fine tune. And fine tuning is where I think movies and television are made. Fine tuning is what really makes it special.
Also, you're as a craftsman or woman or person, like that's where you're learning how. Once you learn how to overcome these obstacles, that's when you're truly earning your marks, or whatever the phrase might be. That's when you learn how to fix and solve a problem in your story. That's when you're really learning how to write, like, because
Yeah.
amateur writers, will you tell them to rewrite something and they're like, okay, yeah, I take your notes, and they just change the name, or you know what I mean, like they don't
Or
really.
they say, I can't do it.
Yeah.
I've seen that happen. Somebody says, I just can't do it. It's not going to work. It won't work that
Yeah.
way. Or I can't, it has to be this way. How else can you do it? But once you've worked one season on a show that does 25 episodes and you have to rewrite them every week,
Hmm.
you very quickly realize, boy, you can fix almost anything, and yet still experienced writers and stuff throw things out. And I see the same show work with that changed element on somebody else's show or somewhere else, where if you just spent the time, look at your problems. You have a really good, it's like you got a really great car and the muffler's too loud.
Hmm.
You just replace the muffler. You don't throw the whole car out.
Right.
I I think you got to think about that. When one thing doesn't work, figure out why it doesn't work. Sometimes that's tied into the whole structure, but sometimes you go in and change the structure to accommodate that piece you want to make better. But you have all this time to spend fixing a problem instead of regenerating from scratch when you only have a week to write the whole thing because of the production schedule. So uh, I think that throwing out the baby with the bathwater is a big mistake that they do a lot in television, and I think it hurts. I think it hurts a lot.
And if you're not solving the problem and you're going back to square one, you might come to another problem that you can't solve because you're
Most
not
likely, you will.
exercising that muscle.
Yeah. And if you keep every time you get to a place where you feel you're in a corner or it's very hard, you quit. Yeah, you don't develop that muscle. You don't develop that thought process that's a problem solver.
Hmm.
So you can't quit every time you hit the hard spot. The same thing with people who say they have writer's block. They hit writer's block and they say, I can't do anything. So I'm just going to take a vacation, or I'm going to smoke some weed, or I'm going to run, or just go out and have a good time today. I'm just not, or I'm going to give up on it entirely. Writer's block isn't like that. When I get writer's block, I write right through it. Just keep writing, and what will happen? A lot of what you'll write isn't very good because you're maybe not inspired at the moment. Maybe you can't figure out where your mind hasn't formed those connections yet. But keep moving, keep stay in motion, keep coming up with ideas. If you make a whole pile of garbage, I guarantee you, if you start picking through that garbage, you're going to find some really good pieces in there that you can use either now or later, or whatever. Just don't say you have a block, and because you have a block, stop.
Hmm.
Then nothing's going to happen. If you have a block, keep writing, pick out the best of what you're writing, let it prime the pump so you think of more good ideas. And yes, for some people, it's better to watch a really great show, watch a really great movie, watch something inspirational. But don't say, I'm just blocked, so I got to do something. I'm just going to quit for a while, or I'm going to quit permanently.
Yeah.
Uh,
Don't quit
that will defeat
permanently.
you. That'll
Sometimes
defeat
it
you.
does help though to like get up and go walk around and like,
Yes. No,
yeah,
sometimes that works. I'm not saying r- that writing through is the only way. I'm saying keep moving. So
keep
if
moving.
in
I
fact,
think that's
yeah.
true.
So
Yeah.
it's either writing or watching something great or talking to other writers and filling things out, stories, uh, um, or taking laps. Running if running stimulates you, or swimming, or yeah, there are a lot of ways to stimulate, but keep thinking about stimulating the thought rather than saying I'm up against that wall. And they,
Mhm.
they made this and they call it writer's block on a wall, and that kind of makes you feel like you're defeated
Mhm.
until you can knock that wall down or whatever. But
Yeah,
I've
you got
just
to get a
found,
grappling hook, you got to like figure out your way over that thing,
yeah, yeah, or through it, or
Mhm.
break it down, go over it, go
Catapult or
around
something.
it,
Yeah.
catapult, yeah, all the inventive ways to go through. And
That's why it's
sometimes the
helpful to
wall
have
just
writer
crackles.
friends, people who can read your work, whether they're writers or not, because then they can spark a little bit of
Yeah.
inspiration and like to help you change course or whatever, you can dig a
You can
tunnel.
join writers groups too, and people join writers groups all the time and
Yeah.
and get feedback. And I'm just saying, don't let writer's block be in fact a block.
Yeah.
Let it be a detour or something, or something that just changes your path in some way. But keep that path, keep moving, keep moving. For me, my favorite way is to keep
Right.
writing bad stuff even until I find it starts turning better, or I start finding those really good things in it. And I go, oh, this good thing is so good. Now I know where that goes, and I can
Right.
rebuild from there.
Yeah.
I
It's
never
just a
stop.
fun energy to have, like when you realize, oh, that is let me go
Yeah,
this way.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Then
yeah.
that's like you really feel like you're doing it. Let me ask you this though, just for conversational, the other side of it. When do you cut your losses?
When do you give up on something?
Like, how do you recognize like this actually is not going to work? It would be better to start on page one.
That happens sometimes.
Yeah.
Sometimes you're right. Usually that only happens for me if I write the whole thing. So I get through the writer's block, I get through the part where I think it's not working, try and make it work the best I can. And then I look at the whole script and say, this script just doesn't have the magic. It's just
Hmm.
not there. And even though maybe I've got all the beats and all the structure correct, it's still not working. Yeah. Then you can throw things. I don't mean you can never abandon a project. Sometimes projects you have to say goodbye to, or you put it in your file, and maybe 10 years from now you'll pull it out when you're doing something else, and you look at it and go, whoa, this is why I like this in the first place. It was this part, and
Hmm.
then just use that part.
Yeah.
Don't use the rest of it. So nothing's a total waste. If you keep files, nothing's a total waste.
I thought I'd ask because sometimes you do have to cut your losses on a project, and you're like, okay,
Sure.
that one's over. But I thought it was important to ask after, especially coming to that other point that you made, which is if you don't work through the problems, if you don't work through the roadblocks, if you're not trying to, then you're not building your skills as a writer. That's a bigger issue
Right.
than finding a piece of work that you put all this time and effort into, and it just doesn't have the magic, like you said. You just, you don't really chuck it, but you just toss it to the side. It's like, all right, I'm done with that piece. Let me go
Yeah.
on to something else, because you can learn something in that process that actually gets you to the next project in a better way. But if you're always finding a roadblock and you're never really deep diving, you're not really thinking it through, you're not really learning how to problem solve, that's a bigger issue, and that will
That
reflect
is a
in a
problem.
lot of your writing, whether
Well,
or
it
not you
also make
finish
it
a
very
piece or not.
hard. It also make it very hard to work on an existing series, on a series on the
Right.
air, because a lot of time your job is saving episodes. That's a big part of the job. And they say sometimes they throw things out too soon. Usually they fix it. Usually you can find the fix, but when people can't find it for a while, they start panicking, and then they
Hmm.
want to throw it all out, and start over. Sometimes that works. I've had shows that I've created that have gotten on the air that got really mediocre ratings.
Hmm.
And then I figure that's like I said, with 10 out of 10 friends tell you your script's no good, you should reconsider, uh, you know, believing in that script anymore. Um, because if you create a show and it gets bad ratings and more bad ratings, and then it's maybe even moved to a new time slot and it's not getting good ratings. Even if you still believe in the show, it's just not making it. It's just not
Hmm.
making it. And you have to make a living, or you have to, put drywall up in houses
It's
or
kind
do
of
some
sink or
kind of
swim.
job,
Yeah, for sure.
so if you have a show that's not working and it's getting bad ratings, you could say, well, I'll just change, I'll recast this character, I'll recast that character, I'll change this. Usually, when I would say almost every time, if a show's not getting good ratings, there's something that just doesn't catch.
Hmm.
Doesn't mean it's not a good writing piece.
Hmm.
It's just not catching. If it doesn't catch, then I would give it up.
There's
Don't
times
keep
too,
trying to
like
fix it.
we talked about this with Confederacy of Dunces. There's times where the people who are reading your work, it may not be an era thing or whatever, but there's a timing thing involved with it catching, and like you sometimes you write something and it's too ahead of its time, or it's not,
Yeah,
something else in the world needs to happen before this piece, that vision is understood, and so and not everybody's writing stuff that's super visionary, and you just can't, people, they just can't see it, man, they just don't have my vision,
I know.
it's not
Yeah,
like that, but you do have, there are moments like that.
yeah, there are.
Moby Dick wasn't a popular novel until, I don't know, like 100 years after Melville died,
Yeah. Well, you
which is not
mentioned
good for him.
Yeah, not good for him at all. Confederacy of Dunces you mentioned was the same case where the author died before he saw it successful, and he
Hmm.
was a young man. He was only in his 30s, I believe. But people told him that was no good, and then it won a Pulitzer Prize when it was finally published for the best fiction that year, or some uh, few years after he died. So, and what happened was his mother believed in it so much, and it was his mother who, after he died, she continued to try and sell it, and she sold it, and it won awards. It won, a major award, Pulitzer Prize, a major writing award. So,
Hmm.
um,
It
it's
happens.
hard. It's hard to know when you have a great idea and when you
Yeah.
don't. When you believe in it, but if you did write Confederacy of Dunces and it did get published and it never made any money or won any awards, still doesn't necessarily mean they were right that it wasn't a great novel. It just didn't have that spark that made it, made it popular. Doesn't
Hmm.
mean it's not great because it's not popular, but I would give up on trying to make my living off of a book that isn't selling, or a show that isn't selling. Go on to the next one, because we have to make a living as writers. Otherwise, as I said, we have to work in construction, putting up drywall, which I did. That's I use that example,
Hmm.
but I didn't have to do that after I started selling scripts. But if you if you write just for yourself, then you're never really going to be able to make a living doing it. And if you can't make a living doing it, then you can't give up the day job.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I've met some homeless writers that were somewhat talented, like in San Francisco, you meet a few of those people, and that seems
Yeah,
like a much more difficult life than just writing and having a job. You know what I mean? Like,
I know.
I
Yeah, if
don't
you had
know,
a
like, why that's the
choice.
choice. Yeah. And I think, like, it helps to have money too, because, and at least in my experience, like, you know, i- if I'm too stressed out about money and I'm thinking, oh man, I got to figure out my rent. Like, if I feel like a pigeon, you know what I mean? And I'm like looking around for that next, morsel to devour. It's like, I can't really, I might write a
Yeah.
lot of stuff, but it's like, I'm not really, I don't know. Actually, I was pretty proficient when I was, really, really not
When
broke and stuff, like for sure.
Well,
But
yeah. When you're young, sometimes you can have ambition even when you're not making a living at it because you figure you have time to make a living at something else. But
mhm,
I know Danny DeVito is somebody I worked with, and he was in his 40s before he got his first major break as an actor, and then he went on to have a fabulous career. And
yeah,
as an actor, director, he owned his own film company and he made other films. But he didn't give up. And I once asked him I said, "Well, you were in your 40s. I don't know, was he 43 or 45, something like that, maybe older. I don't remember. He was in his 40s." And so I asked him, "Well, Danny, when would you have given up?" And he said, "Never." He said, "I
yeah,
would have waited." I said, "I would have bussed tables. I would have cleaned out, the restaurant at night if I had to. Uh, and continue to try and be an actor all my life. I would have never quit.
That's
Now
part of it too. Is like, how bad do you want it? You know?
I know I think I would have quit. I don't
Yeah.
want anybody to think I'm a quitter, but by the way, I've had enough of this show. Let's quit. Um, but I don't think I started writing in college. Well, I mean, I had written before, but I started writing seriously in college. And then I got my first writing job when I was only 25, my first professional paid job on a successful show. So I didn't really have to test myself. I think I might have quit at early 30s. I don't think I would have kept trying. I think I would have tried some other area
Hmm.
had I not made it by my early 30s, but I don't know for sure because I made it when I was 25. So but I do know people who made it later in life. I know people. One person I know who created a very successful show uh, came came late in life because that person continued to try and refused to give up. And I'm just not that way. I'm more practical. So if I had gotten into my early 30s without having made a living as a writer, I think uh, I would have tried building rocket ships or something.
Yeah.
or selling
You know that the average
fake
age
art.
of an astronaut on the space station is 51. The
Really?
average age of a space station astronaut is
Wow.
51.
That's much older than I thought.
Right. The average age of a Formula One driver is 26.
Wow.
Isn't that insane? Like,
Yeah.
I thought you had to like have that type of physical demanding, that's like, so physically
Yeah.
demanding to be a space astronaut on the space station.
Well, I believe most of the airline pilots are older.
Yeah.
I don't think they're all in their late 20s and early 30s. I think there are a
Fighter
lot of
pilots are
older.
like 43, average
Yeah.
43. I looked all this stuff up the other day because I was like
Yeah.
51. I was looking at the space station, like who are the space, astronauts on the space station, and then I was looking at their ages, and I was just like, what? 51. So
Yeah.
like I bring that up because if it doesn't work out with writing early enough in life, you can always be a
An
space station
astronaut.
astronaut.
There
Yeah.
you go. Keep that in mind. That gives you always have that fallback position to be an astronaut. But
Yeah.
uh, that's why, so if you're really dedicated, if you love acting or you love writing, you'll do it all your life. I probably would have always written all my life, but I wouldn't have actively tried to write for shows and
Hmm.
television and get an agent and all that stuff. I did that when I was young but I don't think I would have. I think I would have just written for myself. I don't know for sure. I don't know.
I mean, like I wouldn't really call it a break because I still write, but I'm not pursuing it in the same way that I was before. But that's not because I'm not interested. It's just that the economics of, living and that Hollywood idea or whatever just wasn't working. So it's like you do have to be practical at a certain point, I think.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well,
Because
you're trying a lot of things. So you were just focusing on being a writer,
yeah.
but you had other skills from the years of being in the business and being
And I was a paid
it,
writer for so long, just not in that like,
not
I
in.
wasn't on a show or
Yeah.
something like that.
Right.
Yeah. So it's a little bit different.
So at some point you did what I say makes sense is to increase your increase your potential for luck.
Hmm.
And that means if you happen to be a good writer, actor, director, that if you're pursuing all three things actively, you probably increase your chances again of hitting than if
Hmm.
you're just a director who's just going to direct or whatever. And so when you decided then you're producing things and we're working on this and some other projects
And it
uh
gives me a better perspective too of like overall story building. Like I do feel like, oh, okay, like, I got back into editing and, producing and stuff like that. And it does give me an idea of like, okay, well, I'm thinking, like when I just wrote, it's like you kind of think of it one way, like you were just saying, and then, you kind of switch lanes a little bit. Like when I used to be an editor, I felt like that really helped my writing, like I could chop stories up a little bit
yeah,
differently,
yeah, yeah,
and
put them reorganize. You can reorganize the story sometimes and change the story and make it better just
hmm
through editing can happen. I know somebody who wanted to be a successful writer who today runs a major production company,
hmm
and that was not his choice. That's not the way he wanted to go. He wanted to be a writer,
Hmm.
but then got jobs in the business to support his potential of making it as a writer. And that led to other jobs in the business that he was very good at. And the break or the moment of luck came in producing, which is
Hmm.
not where he expected.
Yeah.
But then they made a fabulous career out of that.
And then you still get to be involved in all these stories and all this, that's all this work and stuff like that. And it exercises a different part of the mind. And, like I still love writing. I still write. So like, I'm not
Yeah.
like, um, you know, I have no intention of abandoning that, or, this is part of the reason why we're doing this show in particular, is because we both
Yeah.
really enjoy the process of writing, and,
I enjoy writing,
love talking
and
about
I
writing.
enjoy. I was gonna say I enjoy just talking about writing. I really enjoy writing so much. I enjoy reading it, talking about it, watching it, uh, and I would do it. I would have done it all my life. I'm just saying I wouldn't have actively pursued that as my means of making a living. That
Yeah.
I would have continued to write, and I think that writing is something I'll do all my life because it's it it's like it's puzzles and
Hmm.
games and stuff, and it keeps my mind uh, active and agile. And
Yeah, and it's pretty special. It does, and I do like, there are certain moments, like when a couple of years ago when I was just writing all day every day, for months and months and months and years on end, that was fun. You know what I mean? I just wasn't at that particular time paying the bills with that type of work. I was still writing, and I was actually getting paid to do other work, but that TV comedy writing was not something that was paying my bills. You know what I mean?
yeah,
So
uh-huh,
I had to kind of like readjust and be like, oh, okay. And then the industry changed. The industry changed quite a bit. Shows were not getting produced in the same rate, or like NBC now is not even, like we talked about before, didn't even order any comedies. Not that that would have
yeah,
affected me personally, but so I felt like the timing of my shift was good, because the industry shifted also.
yeah,
And so I was like, okay, that was actually smart timing. Like I was just a little bit ahead of the curve on that one. But now it's given me more opportunity to, not only like produce stuff, but eventually I can go out and to produce my own work, and like, that kind of thing, and like actually maybe even find another avenue or another way of approaching like getting my work out there.
yeah.
And that'll be pretty cool, I think.
Yeah, I also know of a person who wanted to be a writer, who became a successful actor, who now produces his own writing. He still writes and he produces his own plays
Hmm.
because he made so much money as an actor. He's a very successful actor. He made so much money as an actor, which was not his goal, that now he finances his own love, which is writing. He
Hmm.
he he puts up his own works on stages and as the writer, which is so sometimes you can come back to what you wanted to do by taking a detour that brings you back.
Yeah, I mean, it's, a lot of it. This is why people go to college too. Is like, you don't go to college just specifically for one skill. Like to become a well-rounded person. And everybody has, like, I do chickens. You know what I mean? I don't suggest that for any living person. I just
Well, you gotta say it clear. You don't do chickens. You raise chickens.
I raise chickens, right? Yeah. I thank you for that clarification. But
Yeah,
um, and I like gardening
but
and
you
all
do
kinds of
that. These
stuff.
are things. But just clarify so you know, Airto. He raised chickens just because he liked. It's like it's a hobby for him, and he has a garden, and he has. I mean, he does all these things. It's not like he's a chicken farmer.
Yeah,
But but
not
I
in a legal
understand. I
sense.
understand that.
Yeah,
But
but it informs my writing. Like when I got into
yeah,
gardening and I got into like vermiculture and like worms and stuff like that, I ended up writing a feature film about worms. Not because like I ever thought, I would, but I found worms so fascinating, which is
yeah.
a
Can I ask you a
bizarre thing.
question?
Yeah.
Is that it? Was that a hard movie to cast?
Yeah. It's a hard movie to get people to
Yeah.
read, I think.
Well, yeah, yeah. I'm sorry, Worm, but
Yeah.
you don't wiggle the way we imagine this. So we
And
got
then it turned out, I was writing a completely different genre. I didn't realize I was writing some like, Korean horror film. I didn't know that that was like something I was interested in, but
yeah,
yeah, that's the way it turned out. So, don't be afraid to like, in my mind, I'm thinking like, and this may be just for me, but like, don't be afraid to try different stuff. And, but if you do
yeah,
have a passion, and, it's okay to just pursue that passion. Like you said, like Danny DeVito was like, I'm going to do this for a long time, but
yeah.
he had to find other means of supporting himself while he pursued that
Right,
passion. And that's
right.
important. You have to eat.
Yeah. I did stand-up comedy was the first thing I got into. When I graduated from college, the first thing I did was stand-up comedy, and I played big clubs, and I made a living, a very meager living, very
But you said you
meager.
made it on the
But
Merv Griffin show or something. Was it
well,
Merv Griffin?
I was on some television show. I was on some television shows. Yeah, Merv Griffin. Most people don't know that because that goes so far back.
That's
Most of our
crazy
audience
though.
probably don't even know it. But
You
I
would
was
think
on
he.
American Bandstand as a performer, and I was on I think people know that show, and I was on a couple Canadian shows, and then a couple smaller shows in this country, um, but they just barely paid the bills, just barely paid the bills,
Hmm.
and it was a starving lifestyle. So, but I did have that. I could have made it. I might have had success. At some point, one person wanted to do a TV series with me and a partner I was working with, starring in a variety show. So that could have happened. It didn't. But what my first break came is in writing. But I didn't put all my apples in one barrel either. Uh, I was pursuing other things, but I also was working on a house. I was putting up drywall. Actually, I was doing all sorts of work, primarily putting up drywall, but I was also studying what other people were doing so I could remodel homes. I'd have to hire electricians and people who were licensed for things that had to be licensed. But sometimes you could hire a contractor who would hire you back as a laborer that he oversees or she oversees. And I mean, I was thinking maybe I'd do that. Maybe I'll buy and sell, flip houses. They didn't call them
Hmm.
flipping houses then, but buy and fix up and sell houses. So that's what I was doing when I got discovered for my first writing job, which turned into a career. I was in the middle of fixing a house I bought and was preparing to resell it. And then I got this TV career going. So
And that
I
stuff
don't know.
informs your stories, you know. You could call it method writing or something like that, you know. Like we talked about this before. We both did valet, you know,
Yeah,
and
Valley
we
Parkers.
both,
Yeah.
you know, you've written a script that's valet related, you know. Like we have these stories,
Yes.
you know. You find out these different, you know. It's kind of good to, like, you know, as a writer. The problem with writing for some writers, I think, is they read a lot of books, which is great. You know, you want to be well read. They watch a lot of movies, but they're not experiencing life. You know, I've read writers, you know,
Oh,
as
uh-huh.
being a reader where and known something about the author where I'm like, this person has not been out there in the grind. Like they have been learning the letters and, you know, doing it that way, but their writing reflects somebody who's not well experienced. They don't you're not hearing the voices that they're using as being
Yeah.
supremely authentic. You're not getting a sense that they really have that, you know, they understand the grit and the grime that's on the wrenches as a mechanic, you know, things
Right.
like that, you know. And so I think, you know, in terms of, at least for me, I can't speak for other people, but when I can sometimes, it's a rare writer that has no experience in any of these things and has all the details necessary to convince me they do, you know, like.
Yeah. You can get a lot of vicarious experience by reading books and
Sure.
watching movies. You were saying that, um, but it's different than the actual experience where you see details that you don't get in these other areas that you might be able to use. So it all works out. I think if you decide you want to be a writer, you'll either write all your life and then have some things that you can pass on to your kids or somebody or donate to a library or something and never even get published, but um or maybe just keep for yourself and your family. But you still write. Writing's a pleasure. Writing's a pleasure for me, and even though
Hmm.
I made a really good living at it for a lot of years, now I taught writing for a while, which I didn't expect to do. I taught at university,
Hmm.
and
Yeah, writing led to that. That was
yeah, and
different, you know, probably were never thinking about being a professor.
yeah, and now I do other ideas. We're trying to do something for the internet, which I never even existed when I was writing for Taxi, and uh, it's just who knows. But I'll always write. I really enjoy the process of writing. I don't know what I would do if I didn't write. I think there are people who paint who
Mhm.
don't expect to ever sell their paintings, but it gives them peace of mind and comfort.
Mhm.
There's probably more people paint or do those kinds of physical artistic things than people who write just for their own pleasure. But I don't know that for a fact. But I'm just saying that I see art writing classes all over the place. I don't see many of these kinds of neighborhood writing shops.
Mhm.
Like they have art shops, but it's a great form of art. So those of you who think, well, I love writing, I'm a storyteller, then be a storyteller all your life, even if you don't make a living at it.
Yeah, storytelling, that's an ancient art, so that's something that, you can carry with you.
Yeah,
Yeah, and do
yeah,
whenever you can be. There's great storytellers that you work with somebody and like, you work, I've definitely come across like great storytellers, people who just like they just know how to weave a tale together and you're like, wow,
yeah.
this is
People,
really good. If you wrote that down, you could probably make a lot of money.
yeah. Some people just tell great stories, and sometimes they're not even classically structured the way they need to be, but the person just knows how to tell a story, and that happens a lot of times. And if you don't make it as a writer, you could always buy a houseboat and get a lot of tattoos and date a lot.
Mhm. Yeah, that'd
that
be.
that works. That works as well. As
But
that's
then
the
you're going to
spirit
have
of writing.
stories to tell, so then eventually you will become a storyteller.
Yeah, or maybe not. Maybe you just date more and get another houseboat.
Nobody flips houseboats.
Oh, they don't?
I
Do
don't know,
they?
do they? I don't know. That's not something I'm
I
familiar
don't
with.
know. I don't know. I know. So I've known people who've lived on boats, and they do sell them, like they sell houses, but they don't own the property though, because they're usually in a what do they call where they dock the boats in a yacht club or something,
Mhm.
a boat club.
Yeah.
But seriously, if you didn't find one form of art, you might find some other, and maybe the art practices you learned as a writer will make help you make better choices as a house flipper. Who knows?
Yeah.
You just don't know. But if you're always looking for something that's kind of stimulating and keeps your brain going, and you look forward to doing, that's a great thing. And most people don't get that from their jobs.
Yeah.
9 out of 10 people you ask about their job will tell you they hate it, or they just do it because they have to support themselves or their families. Um, so maybe you won't make a living as a writer, but you might find something that really makes you feel good to do all your life.
Yeah, with a job you get all the manipulation but none of the perks, none of the self awareness or whatever. But yeah, I mean it's very interesting,
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. You know what is interesting? Diablo Cody, the
Mhm.
writer,
Yeah.
she was
Juno.
actually she was a pole dancer at one point,
Mhm.
uh, and that helped her. You know how it helped her? I don't think she ever wrote any stories about it. I don't know her career that well, but I know she wrote Juno, which was a very good movie.
Mhm.
Um, and she had a couple series. But people wanted to meet her because she was a pole dancer, and they thought it was cool. This pole dancer who has all these scripts, we'll just meet her because it'd be an interesting meeting. So
Mhm.
in a way, she found a way to get in, and she had the writing talent to then take the luck she made for herself and then use her writing talent to make a career in
Mhm.
writing, which is what she wanted to do, not pole dancing. But her pole dancing got her something, got her meetings with these sleazy old men who wanted to meet the pole dancer, and
Somebody,
that's
I
a bad that's a
guarantee you,
bad thing. But
I guarantee you, somebody said, this pole dancing is never going to get you anywhere in life. And
yeah,
she's like, oh, I'll show you,
I'll show you. Yeah, she
Yeah.
ends up being a major motion picture and television writer because of her pole dancing.
And then she
So
slid down upside down and, bounced a little bit. And then they're like, I'll read your script.
so your takeaway from this particular episode of our show is pole dancing is a viable
Career
avenue
path.
to a career path for
Yeah,
writing
yeah,
for writing career.
that's
So
the way to become a writer.
yeah, so I
Method
did not
writing.
start. I did not start as a pole dancer though. But
There's
did you
always
ever you ever pole
tomorrow.
dance? Airto, you ever pole dance?
No, no, no. I've never pole
Okay,
danced.
all right, all
Uh-uh.
right. But
But
yeah, you never know.
I'm not shutting that door just yet.
Yeah,
Now
I
that I
know you
know it
don't
worked for Diablo
have.
Cody.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I guarantee you, it'd get you a few meetings.
Yeah, I bet it would. Yeah. Yeah.
And not all sleazy guys. Some people just think, wow, it's just kind of cool. She's a writer and she's a pole dancer. I want to meet her because she's probably really interesting in personality.
Probably give me like a diversity writing fellowship or something like that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
You could, yeah, you should take, everybody should take any legitimate path you can take to try and further your career as a writer or producer. You got to take them.
Hmm.
You got to take them.
Yeah, and it's fun. You know, if you enjoy it,
Yeah.
it's fun. So it's like,
Yeah,
what the
yeah, I
heck.
did write. You mentioned I was a valet parker, and I've written a pilot about valet valets, but I haven't sold it yet, but I might soon. But
And that's the
I
thing
have
about being a
an interest
valet.
in it.
As a person who's been a valet, you're always thinking like, this could be a fucking story. Like
I know.
this,
I
you
get
could
that all
meet
the
so many
time.
crazy people and do so much weird stuff, and you're just one location. It's like perfect for a TV show.
I know. I get that all the time. I get you go in to check a book from a librarian, and she sees your name. Say, your name looks familiar. Oh, I wrote for Taxi. I have this greatest idea. You got to do a show about a librarian
Yeah,
who works
that's
who
hilarious.
works who works in the in Sherman Oaks
Yeah, you're
in
just telling people,
in the local little
shh.
library. I'm telling you, I've got a million stories. I'm telling you, the truth is, I have gotten similar kinds of the people who think their jobs or their lives or
Their lives. That's the number one thing.
inspire stories, and it can and it may,
Sometimes, yeah. But you do get those people a lot of times where they're like, my life could be a movie, man. You just got to listen, let me just tell you this. And then you're just like,
yeah.
okay, well, let me hear this. And then you're like, that's not a movie. That's,
Yeah, yeah. No, I've had them. I've had people get mad. I had somebody once say, "I've got this great idea for a series. I'm not a writer, so I'm just going to give it to you." And I don't really want it because if it's similar to something I have, then I can't do it because you're no, no, you can have it. And then she pitched it to me. She's a neighbor of mine and a friend. And pitched it to me, and I didn't like it at all. And I said, "I don't want to develop that. I'm not going to go anywhere with it." And she stopped talking to me.
yeah. What's that movie with Tim Robbins where he's a producer and a bunch of writers are bringing him stories, and it's like about a writer. I don't, maybe it's called The Writer or something like that. It's a actually well-known Hollywood movie. I can't remember the name of it. I'll have to look it up, but one of the reasons I know about it is because we watched that film in my cinematography class, where he was like, it's because it's got like one of the longest tracking shots, and like,
Oh,
it's
yeah,
pretty cool. Ken Eston actually, not Ken Eston, Ken Farrow actually
yeah.
was talking about that tracking shot. But
Oh, really? Oh,
maybe it's called The Producer or something like that. Maybe that's the name of the movie.
the
Not The
producer.
Producers with like
Yeah,
Nathan
yeah, yeah.
Lane and Matthew Broderick, but
I had an interesting experience last night. I watched a movie that I remembered from my childhood as being a great movie, and
yeah,
I saw it last night. And I didn't like it at all,
yeah.
and I could see why it was a great movie for its time, but it was still fun to watch it because it was fun and going, why did I think this was a great movie?
Hmm.
And that was still a fun experience. It was still very entertaining for me seeing something that was wonderful for me as a child and not wonderful for me as an adult in this particular time period.
Hmm.
So uh, you don't know what will I would have guessed in those days when I saw it, that movie would have been a classic that would live forever, and it just doesn't. But some of the episodes I wrote for Taxi, I think. Uh, they rerun and rerun and rerun, and I don't understand why either. I've written a lot of episodes, and some of them I think are great, some I think are very good, and some I think, well, I guess that's it. They're all either great or very good.
Yeah.
um, but some just play more often. I get
Hmm.
residual checks and stuff from they play them again and again and again. And you don't always know why. I like them all, but some of them I don't. I actually have to say some of them I watched that I wrote a long time ago, and I'll watch them again. I don't remember them exactly, and I'll think, gee, that wasn't that good. I wish I'd rewritten. I wish I'd done this differently.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, what was the movie that you watched?
Barefoot in the Park.
Barefoot in the Park. I don't know if I've heard
You
of
know
that
that
one.
movie? It was
Mm-mm.
written by Neil Simon, who at that time was king of Broadway. He had
Mm-hmm.
every year he had a hit play on Broadway, and they were all being made into movies,
Mm-hmm.
and they were all successful as movies too. But they weren't musicals; they were all plays.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know why I was thinking about musical. They weren't musicals. Um, but it didn't work for me. It didn't work for me anymore at all. Not at
Hmm.
all. And
Yeah.
I except I appreciated that. That's why that worked. That worked in that time. And I can understand why it worked during the time it was written and for the audience it was written for.
Hmm.
And I can't help wonder if Neil Simon were still writing, if he would write that same kind of movie or not.
Hmm.
I don't think he would. I think he would. He was a talented writer and talented storyteller who was telling the kind of story that they wanted at the time, that time of the world.
Hmm.
And I think he would have adapted. I think he'd be writing differently now.
Yeah. Now it'd be a superhero movie or something. That's very interesting because, like I was saying earlier, you have an era. Like, say you write something and it's like it doesn't hit right now. You know what I mean? That could be
Uh,
because the era is focused on something else, and then
yeah,
maybe it'll grow toward your particular thread of writing, or maybe it won't. It just depends. Doesn't mean it's a bad thing if you wrote something and people don't even ever know about it. You still have that. If you're a process person, then you went through that process. But that's interesting. I find comedies like that. There's definitely comedies that I thought were super hilarious when I was younger, and I go back and watch them, and I'm like, I don't even laugh. I don't even chuckle.
yeah.
I'm just like, oh, this is kind of
That's what it
dumb.
was like for this movie's a comedy, and I remember thinking it was funny and sexy and clever. And this time through, I didn't think it was any of those things, and
Yeah.
yet I understood why it worked during its time period. During the time that it was so successful, there was a different sensibility about all those things: sexy, funny, exciting. They were all there was a different style, and they were there for
Hmm.
that style, but that style doesn't work anymore. It wouldn't work, say, in TV,
Right.
but or probably in feature or even Broadway. But um, I hope I'm writing things that will last more than one generation. I hate to think the things I've written in my lifetime are going to be watched in the next generation or the generation after that, and they think, oh, why was this even funny?
Hmm.
I hope I haven't written stuff like that. But if somebody as talented as Neil Simon did that, then I'm probably mine's probably going to be the same. There's really going to be a change in the world that'll make the stuff I wrote for those shows dated and not work.
I mean, if it's topical, I mean, that you always run the risk. That's the thing about comedy too, is comedy is usually topical. Like usually has something to do with, like for example, all the people who made like OJ Simpson's jokes and stand up, like take stand up for example. Stand up is very topical. So your set in 1990s doesn't work in 2009 or
Yeah.
2019, and Seinfeld did his I don't know if it was like I'm telling you for the last time, if that was his tour or something where he did his original Johnny Carson set,
Oh,
and it's pretty,
interesting.
yeah, it was
Did it
pretty
work?
interesting.
It still worked?
I think he like cherry picked a little bit and he,
Uh,
moved some stuff up. He updated some of the jokes. You know what I mean? Just to
uh,
kind of, because some of the stuff he's saying, even though it was mundane at the time, is now a hot topic, or not hot topic, but could get you canceled. Not because what he's saying is
oh, right, right,
controversial.
right.
It's just that our
Well, it
sensibilities
is
have shifted.
controversial. Some of them are controversial. I
Yeah.
worked on Cheers, and today you couldn't do a Sam Malone the way we did Sam Malone because he was a womanizer, and that kind of thing is so frowned on right now. Nobody really wants to develop anything with a
Right.
guy who was a philanderer or a womanizer.
Yeah.
Uh, and there was a lot of that in Barefoot in the Park. There was a lot of stuff that was not appealing to a feminist point of view. And
Sure.
there was even a philanderer that was funny. There was a womanizing kind of scary guy today was
Mhm.
funny in that and made me kind of cringe.
Mhm. Mhm.
Uh, so
Yeah,
it
maybe that's
changes.
part of it. Is your sensibilities have changed so much that you're like, oh, okay, this doesn't appeal to me anymore.
Yeah.
That's pretty. That's also another fascinating aspect of writing for in a certain mind. And it maybe he wouldn't. Maybe Neil Simon would be like, this is not like I wouldn't even
That's what
want
I'm
this to
thinking.
be
That
reproduced or reshown.
I believe that. I believe Neil Simon, if he were writing today, if he were around today, he would not write that film. He would
Hmm.
write something very good because he was a talented storyteller, but not that he wouldn't write that film or that play.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, characters that it would be interesting to An interesting take would be to take a character from something that was older, or well known, and then see how that character has evolved. Like
Uh,
whether or not they've actually decided that, oh, that wasn't really, I was kind of on the wrong path. You know what I mean? But physical comedy, I think, is the only thing that will really kind of like expand the test of time, just because of sensibilities change. But like Buster Keaton is funny, was probably as funny then and
yeah,
daring then as he
I
is
think
now.
so. I think so.
Yeah.
It, uh, my brother loves the Three Stooges, and
Yeah.
it's all physical shtick.
I used
And
to love the Three Stooges. Holy
yeah,
shit. I used to love
uh,
the Three Stooges.
and the Marx Brothers, they're not as much physical, obviously, as the Three Stooges, but they had a lot of set up punchline kind of jokes, and also a lot of sight gags.
Hmm.
Uh, and they hold up. Those are classics. Those are forms that hold up.
Yeah. The Three Stooges for sure, though, because it's like it's kind of funny to watch somebody get poked in the eye and, like all that kind of stuff, and camp it up a little bit. It's a different kind of vibe, than like I was
Yeah.
thinking of Spaceballs. That's what I was thinking of when I used to love
Oh,
Spaceballs, and then I watched it again, and I was like, I don't know if I like the jokes are so on the nose. And then a couple of years later, I watched it again, and I was like, oh, this is actually kind of funny. You know what I mean? It's
yeah.
a mood thing, like
No, I met Mel Brooks because at one point he was going to do Spaceballs as a TV series.
oh, okay, that would have been cool.
Yeah, and he hadn't done a TV series since, I think, Get Smart. I think that was
I
his.
used to
I think that was
love
one
Get
of his.
Smart.
Yeah.
Man, I used to love that show.
So, and I think he wrote variety stuff. I don't know Mel's history is that well. I know, from some of his movies, and
Hmm.
and I know he's been around forever doing really fun, funny stuff.
Blazing
But
Saddles, where he punched the horse in
yeah,
the
yeah,
mouth. That was
yeah.
fucking hilarious. That still
But
makes me
when
laugh.
when he um when he met with me, he wanted to make it into a TV series, and he asked me which character I would make the lead of the series. And I told him, and we discussed it, and we discussed what the series could be, and then he never did it. I don't
Hmm.
know why he never did it. He didn't, but yeah. So sometimes movies become series, and sometimes series become movies. So gosh,
But
there's
do you
just
think it
so
would have
many.
worked as a TV show? Because I feel like sci-fi and comedy as a mix, you think it would be a pretty perfect mix, but it
Yeah,
doesn't seem like there's Galaxy Quest that Tim Allen did, which is really good, and
yeah. I
then
think that's good too, but it didn't do that well.
didn't do that well. And then there's the one with that the creator of Family Guy. I can't remember his name all of a sudden because that's my style. Um, he created a sci-fi comedy, and it didn't really do that great. It was funny, but I don't know. It's like a weird mix. I feel
Well,
like
that's why
sci-fi
I
people take
said
themselves very seriously. That might be why.
I don't know if it's just the genre, or it's just, as I said, sometimes you'll do a series because I've been around long enough that I've had a number of series get on the air, and you always think they're going to be a hit because you've
Yeah.
done all the right things to make it a hit. You've studied why, and you've had to pitch it, and people had to say, "Oh, they believe it's a hit. They'll believe it's a hit." And you had this, so you got all these people believing it's going to be a hit, and you put it on, it's not a hit,
Hmm.
and it's so hard to know. It's so hard. And that's when you give up on that idea. I say once you've executed the idea and it doesn't work, then you move on. You don't keep trying to
Right. Yeah.
fix that. That's not
Yeah.
where I was talking about before about fixing things instead of throwing them out. No, once it fails, then you move on.
Right.
Um, and I've had a number of series that fail. I've actually had some succeed too, and and they usually surprise me. They usually surprise me. I think one's going to get picked up and doesn't. I think one's going to be successful and it isn't, and something I don't count on is. And
It's hard to
I
hard
I
to
didn't
nail
think
down.
like The Simpsons was part of the Tracy Ullman Show, which was my show. The Tracy Ullman Show I created with some other writers, and we hired Matt Groening to create The Simpsons for our show. But when it spun off to a series, I didn't think it was going to be a monster hit, so I didn't go with it or want to go with it or even think about that. Didn't see it as a huge hit. Boom! It's like the longest running comedy on television ever. been on I think 32 years or something. It's a
Been quite a while. Yeah.
long time. So
Yeah.
gosh, you don't know. You just don't know. You got to do your best work and you put it out there. And sometimes it's magical to other people, and other times it's not. Sometimes it's very popular, and sometimes it's not. There are movies that become classic cult movies. They're very popular to a very small niche of people,
Hmm.
and they love it to death, and it stays around forever. But it never. It just doesn't appeal to a big audience.
Yeah.
That
Seth
there are a lot
MacFarlane.
of them like that. Yeah, Seth MacFarlane.
Seth MacFarlane. But I was thinking Rocky Horror Picture Show. I just saw somebody driving in front
Oh,
of me the other
oh,
day with the sticker Rocky Horror Picture Show, and I've seen it a couple times. But I'm like, the audience. I mean, they are involved. You know, like
oh,
they get
yeah,
in, they know the words, the songs. There's people running up and down the aisles. Like it's a whole thing. You know, and I don't
yeah.
know any other movie that's like that. I would have thought maybe Fight Club would be like that. Something cool. You know what I mean? But Die Hard or something maybe. But I don't get Rocky Horror Picture Show like that. That doesn't appeal to me like that. But it's cool
Well,
for them.
I like the Rocky. What's it called?
Rocky Horror
Rocky
Picture Show
Horror Picture Show. Yeah, yeah,
or
Rocky
Little
Horror
Shop of
Picture.
Horrors. I thought would have done that. You know what I mean? Something like that.
Yeah, yeah, I like that too. That was a very good little movie that was so entertaining that I think it did make a lot of money. But it was, I think it was originally Little Shop of Horrors was originally a cheap film, a
I'm not.
movie.
I know it was a. I think it was a remake or something like that. Yeah. Like, was
Well,
it
I
a B
think
movie or something?
the musical version was and the Broadway version that became the movie version were it was all based on a little horror film,
Hmm.
little horror film that was House of Horror, Little Shop of Horror was about this plant that comes from another planet that eats people, that's fed by the shop owner, and they made that into a comedy, a musical comedy that was very successful.
Yeah, that
So
was
who
crazy
knows? It's
successful.
like it's not the horror film was not nearly as successful as the spinoff of it or the variation of it.
Hmm. I'm really only familiar with the one with Steve Martin, but yeah, I mean that's
That's the one. That's the movie. Yeah, that's the
yeah,
movie version.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
that's the movie version. The musical movie version that was the spinoff of the horror film.
yeah, yeah. I mean that. I don't know. That's pretty interesting, actually. You just
So you
never
could do
know.
that. You could right now. Maybe somebody out there listening has seen some little play somewhere that's a drama or a horror or something, and thinks, "Oh man, I can make this into a great comedy." Maybe you can. Maybe just get the rights from the writer or co-write the next version with the writer. Or who knows? You might have the next thing that comes from a failure or nothing into a huge hit. There've been a lot of cases like that.
I always wanted to do a live action version, especially now with all the 3D stuff that's out there of the Jetsons. That would be like
Yeah,
so you could do it so good now. That would just be amazing.
yeah, yeah,
And I thought that
yeah.
Robert Rodriguez was gonna do the Jetsons at some point, which I think would be a good pick because he's got like all that 3D knowledge and he's like
Uh-huh.
really great at all that kind of stuff. But and he did. I don't know. Did you watch what was the movie that he made with fuck man, I'm just terrible at names. The one where Sin City. Did you see Sin City? That's actually really cool. It's a really cool
Yeah,
film. Yeah, and it's not really my genre. I'm not really in. I never read comic books growing up. So I don't know much
yeah.
about that style, but that is a really interesting film, and the way it's done is very, very interesting. And
Uh,
that's one of those where I've seen a couple of times, even though it's like I don't love it, you know what I mean? I like it, I think it's really cool,
yeah.
but I look at it more for technical and then also for the I forget the guy who plays like the main character. Not Bruce Willis, he's in there, but not Elijah Wood either, but the guy who was the boxer who used to be in like all the romance movies and then he went to France and became like a boxer for a while and people say like, oh, he messed up his face because he like got into a motorcycle accident.
Oh. I know. Yeah, I know who you're talking about. I can't think of his name.
And he was really good in The Wrestler. I don't know if you ever saw that. Talk of Aaron Aronofsky's movie.
Oh,
Uh,
what's his name? Oh, I know who you're talking about. I can't think of his name either.
and he would come into the where I was valeting, he would come into the restaurant there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Y-
I have to look it up
I
real
can't
quick.
even. I can't even.
I just
It
gotta.
doesn't matter. It's not.
That I thought like I thought Robert Rodriguez would do a good job, doing that kind of live action Jetsons. I just think the Jetsons now with technology and everything would just be so cool.
When you say his name, I'm gonna know it instantly. Mickey
Yeah, that's
Rourke.
it. That's it. Yeah, you got it. Mickey Rourke.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was good in that. He was also really good in the Wrestler. If you ever seen the Wrestler?
Yeah, yeah. I didn't know he actually became a professional boxer for a while. I didn't know
Yeah,
that
I think
happened.
so. Yeah, for a
Yeah.
little bit. Yeah, when he was in like Europe or something. I don't know a lot about his backstory or his history or anything. I just I hear bits and pieces, but yeah, definitely. But anyway, yeah. Well, I think
Well,
it's
that's
time to.
also if it, yeah. Well, before we sign off, I was going to say that's another very good avenue to a career in television. Become a professional boxer.
Yeah, that's what Jake. Is it Jake Paul? I don't know if you're familiar with the Paul brothers. They're doing that. They got a fight with Mayweather. One of I don't know which one, Jake
Oh,
Paul or
really?
I
Uh,
don't know those guys very well, but yeah, they
yeah.
fought Mayweather. They made like $30 million.
Yeah, yeah. It made a lot of money. Not a good fight, but made a lot of
No,
money. But
no.
Tony Danza was a boxer. Well, I'm just kidding about obviously the boxing is a good route to television career, but Tony Danza was a boxer and wanted to be an actor, and then combined the two to go on Taxi as a boxer character. The character was a boxer,
Hmm.
and then Tony went on to do Who's the Boss, from which he made a fabulous fortune,
Hmm.
and then started doing a Vegas act where he did music and dancing. He would dance and sing, and so I mean, even later in his career, when he had already made a lot of money, he still switched careers to another entertaining. And then he did drama, and he was very good in drama for a while. And
Hmm.
uh, I don't know what he's doing right now, but I haven't heard from him or about him in a long time. But I'm just saying again, sometimes you start down one avenue and it leads to a different one, and maybe that one ends up a bit better than the first one. I started out to be a stand-up comic and maybe a performer for variety shows, and then but really wanted to be a writer because that's what I studied in college. And then while all this other stuff was kind of happening, my partner left because he wanted to do a solo act. So then I wrote my spec scripts and ended up getting to be a writer, where I was really going down the avenue because I was headlining at places like the Comedy Store and places like that with people like Robin Williams and David Letterman and Jay Leno, people who made it very big. And there was a lot of interest in me in that time. And then I had a partner, and then my partner split. He said, I don't want to be half of something very successful. I want to be my own
Hmm.
success. And he left, which was a huge favor to me because then I pursued my writing, which is what I really had wanted to do in the first place. But I just fell into the stand up by accident, and then was doing very well at it. But but then because my partner split, I submitted a spec script. I don't know if I would have ever submitted a spec script without having a partner who abandoned the thing we were going toward, and then I had to jump on something quickly, and the thing I jumped on was sending in a spec script and got me a job. Timing was perfect. If it had been later or earlier, I might not have gotten to Taxi at the time they were hiring somebody new. So
Yeah, it's
luck,
crazy. You just gotta kind of
luck.
roll with it, Like try the thing, and if that works for you, cool. And then if not, try something else, And if you still
Yeah,
want to keep doing it, just keep doing it. There's no like, there's no problem with it, unless it's something physically demanding like skateboarding or something like that. Which people
yeah.
still skate, even later in these. I'm surprised sometimes to see some of my friends still at it, or even some of the older guys. I'm just like, wow, I don't know how your body could
It's
put up
pretty
with that.
amazing, yeah. Because you guys are working on a hard surface. I see these older guys surfing, and I
Hmm.
know surfing is really challenging,
Oh yeah, you get
but
wrecked surfing.
I know, but still, they're not on a hard surface. I know
Yeah,
that I know. Yeah, underneath the ocean, there's the ocean floor, and a lot of people have been seriously hurt by
yeah,
hitting the
for
bottom
sure.
of but and hitting piers and pilings and stuff like that. But I'm just saying, yeah, it seems like skateboarding really has a short life
Yeah, it's
And
longer than I thought. And if people would have told me like, oh, like you could actually be a professional skateboarder into these years, these years that I'm in and like even older, I probably it's like like I got into writing through skateboarding, so that's like kind of
yeah,
what you're saying. It's like you went through stand-up comedy, and I always wrote. I didn't have any expectation to be a writer for anybody or get paid. That was like completely foreign to me. That was not ever anything I'd ever thought about, and it just so turned out that I ended up writing, and then I started writing a lot and getting paid for it, and then I was like, oh, you can do something without getting hurt on a daily basis.
yeah.
This is interesting. Let me try this for a little bit.
But then you got an editor who used to hit you with a heavy dowel when you
Yeah.
didn't deliver something he liked.
Well, it's like my
Yeah.
pages came back as bloody as I did, like because I didn't have any schooling. So then I went to school and I learned what to do, and then that changed everything. But
Yeah.
so there's different avenues to pursue and different ways to look at things, and it's all.
Yeah. If I hadn't gone to college, I went to UCLA and to Davis. If I hadn't done that, I wouldn't have gotten into the stand up. Because I got into stand up by meeting my partner, and I played the banjo and he played the guitar, and we did comedy mixed in with the music, and that was what took off for me first when I came back. But I wouldn't have done that had I not gone to college.
Hmm.
And yet you think, well, is that what you learned in college? How to do silly stand up stuff that we did? And I'd say, well, that was a big part of it. But
Yeah,
I learned a lot of other things too that you can't put your finger on. But it
yeah.
was a really good experience. But then I did major in English and in creative writing, and that is where I ended up making my living. But uh, it's all just, man, you just gotta live. You just
It's
gotta
a
live your
journey.
life, and if you don't make it as a writer, the houseboat, buy the houseboat,
start start
get
flipping
tattoos.
flipping real estate, houseboat real estate.
Yeah,
Yeah,
houseboat real estate. That's gonna be the big that's the next big market.
yeah.
Houseboat real estate. That's
So
funny that you could do that. You buy a houseboat, and you happen to sell yours. The neighbor said, "Well, you sold yours. Can you sell mine? You sell that one." And the next thing you know, you're the houseboat king.
yeah,
And
that's
then
pretty.
you can pay for your own. Like Dan Castellaneta pays for his own plays to be produced that he writes because that's what he really wanted to do, but made his fortune as Homer Simpson. Um, you can make your fortune doing who knows what, and you end up making all your money flipping houseboats, and use that to produce your own Broadway, your musical that ends up on Broadway, and you become the king of Broadway. So
Yeah, there's
who
this guy.
knows?
I can't remember who it was, but he said he went to Hollywood to become a writer, or to become a writer. I don't know if he was a writer before he got to Hollywood or whatever, but he went to Hollywood to become a writer and ended up being like this huge, huge real estate mogul. Like a
Huh?
billionaire mogul with real estate. I can't remember his name or anything, but I remember at the time thinking like, yeah, I don't know, man, but you could have been writing, what I mean? Like, and
Yeah.
I didn't really think like, oh wait, but now you can do whatever you want. You know what I mean? Like it's totally up to you. You know. That's the thing. Just get rich. Pole dance your way to fame and fortune, and then you can do whatever you want.
Yeah. Okay. So the bottom line is we're changing your new takeaway is
Yeah.
become a pole dancer, flip houseboats, make a fortune, and then produce your own movies.
Yeah. There you go.
That's it.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's your lesson for today. Tell everybody about that, and we'll get a lot more listeners or viewers.
And don't forget to smash that like button and your subscribe button and then hit the bell or whatever, the notification. That's what people say all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So send us money. Here's our
Yeah.
address. No, we don't do this. We
I think
just
I'm
do.
supposed to say smash the like button in the beginning of the episode, but it's that call to action. That's the
Uh,
sales pitch.
well, we just do this for the pleasure of it. So you don't have to give us anything.
Well, we want polls, 'cause we got a
Oh,
lot of dancing to do.
oh yeah, yeah,
Poles are
yeah,
expensive. Actually, no, send us money and we'll buy our own poles, and then we'll
yeah.
do the dancing. And then,
Well, you do the dancing. I will collect the money and
yeah,
produce the movie.
yeah. Right now my back hurts though, so I'm gonna be a little bit
Well,
sloppy
eh,
with some of the
don't
moves.
make excuses.
No,
Start
I'll be
exercising.
professional. I'll get some, a little
All
icy
right, you'll
hot
be
and
the pill
everything.
answer. Give a call to what's
Diablo,
her name? Diablo.
Diablo,
Yeah, Diablo.
Diablo,
Yeah, that's the
Diablo
devil.
Cody.
Diablo Cody. Yeah. Give her a call and see how to get started. And okay, that's enough. We got way off track here at the end, so we're gonna cut all this out. None of you will ever see this part anyhow, so it doesn't
It's all
matter.
good.
So now you gotta say goodbye, so you can cut to the goodbye.
We'll say happy birthday. Who do we say happy birthday to this week?
Happy birthday to Cooper.
Cooper.
I
All
like
right,
that
Cooper.
name.
Yeah.
Happy birthday, Cooper. You didn't know we were gonna pick you, and there aren't a lot of Coopers in the world, so you know we're
Yeah.
talking about you.
So great fucking job, Cooper. You did it.
Yeah, you
Happy
did it,
birthday.
Cooper. Happy birthday.
All right.
All right, take care.